Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining, and thank you for joining on another live, joining me rather on another live session on the Classified channel. And today we're looking at a rather interesting topic, another interesting topic, from Rome to Trump, the rise of Christian nationalism. That is what we're going to be looking at this afternoon. Now, the term religion comes from the Latin origins of religion is religio. And many people talk about Rome under the papal power being a religio-political power. So we know that religio is coming from the Latin word, which means religion. It's originally meant obligation or bond. It was probably derived from the verb religiare, which means tie back, tie tight, source of the English word rely, a compound formed from the prefix re, back, and legiare, tie. In fact, the word from the Portuguese word, which means to connect, to call someone, is ligar. So we can see that religion ties you, connects you with someone. It developed this specialized sense bond between human beings and the gods. And from the 5th century, it came to be used for monastic life, the sense in which English originally acquired it via Old French religion. So religious practices emerged from this, but the word's standard modern meaning did not develop until as recently as the 16th century. So we have a few people here, few sociologists, like the Emile Durkheim. He was a social theorist, and he defined religion as a unified system of beliefs and practices relative to sacred things. To him, sacred meant extraordinary, something that inspired wonder and that seemed connected to the concept of the divine. Durkheim argued that religion happens in society when there is a separation between the profane, which ordinary life, and the sacred. A rock, for example, isn't sacred or profane as it exists. But if someone makes it into a headstone or another person uses it for landscaping, it takes on different meanings, one sacred, one profane, which would be secular. Max Weber, another prominent Western sociologist, believed religion could be a force for social change. He examined the efforts of religion on economic activities and noticed that heavily Protestant societies, such as those in the Netherlands, England, Scotland, and Germany, were the most highly developed. Capitalist societies and those that were more successful business leaders were Protestants. So he was suggesting then that the Catholic societies were the least productive, while the Protestant societies were more productive. So religion does define or help to define even secular societies. In his writing, The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism, he contends that the Protestant work ethic influenced the development of capitalism. Weber noted that certain kinds of Protestantism supported the pursuit of material gain by motivating believers to work hard, be successful, and not spend their profits on frivolous things. Karl Marx, another great Western philosopher, and we know him as the father of the Communist Manifesto, he viewed religion as a tool used by capitalist societies to perpetuate inequality. He believed religion reflects the social stratification of society and that it maintains inequality and perpetuates the status quo. For him, religion was just an extension of working class, the proletariat, economic suffering. He famously argued that religion is the opium of the people, right? So today we're going to be looking at this important topic because it's one that is filling our news medias with lots of things, and we need to define what religion usually is. Now we're going to look at some words before we get into our chat and greet and meet. Now we're looking at some things like integralis. There are some definitions we have to define here, usually associated with the integralists, right? And it's usually associated with traditional Catholics. So a lot of times when we hear about Christian nationalism, The media simplifies it and people think that they know what they're talking about. But many people don't know, and that's why we're here to educate and to enlighten. Now, the integrationalist, okay, or the integralists, sorry, argue that the state should be ordered toward the common good as understood by Christianity. Often critical of liberal secularism and strict church-state separation, key figures include Adrian Vermeule, Patrick Deneen, though not all would call him an integralist, and others in the post-liberal movement. Then we have the Christian nationalists. So these are important definitions that you need to know, because this is how you are going to be educated. The media simplifies stuff, and we have to look at things from the right perspective, right? So it's often Protestant or evangelical. And many of you don't know that there is a difference between, when we talk about Christianity, you talk about Catholics, and you also talk about evangelicals, you talk about Protestant. Many people still do not know the difference. They just think that everything is under the umbrella of Christian. Believe the United States has a Christian foundation and should explicitly reflect Christian values in public life. Now, it tends to be more rooted in Protestant traditions than Catholic integralism, associated with debates around nationalism, American identity, and the role of Christianity in government. Now, if you're thinking of a term that is often contrasted with integralism, it may be Christian reconstructionism. So we're learning new vocabulary here in tonight's discussion, and that is mainly taught by R.G. Rushdoony and Gary North. And then we can look at also dominionism, and it's a broader label often used by critics. So you see, all of these definitions fall under the realm of Christian nationalism, but they are different and they have different meanings. The media like to show that this is one group, the blacks versus white, and it is not as simplistic as they are presenting it to you. Then we have post-liberalism. It's a system in which related but broader intellectual movement, which suggests here that, you have too many liberalism. So there are people who are saying the state should be secular and there should be no sort of interference of Christianity or religion on the state. But the post-liberalists say there should, or there ought to be. Then we have the national conservatism, which overlaps with Christian nationalism in some circles. So for a discussion on Christian nationalism this afternoon, tonight, the most common contrast is usually Catholic integralism, that's Catholic integralism versus Protestant Christian nationalism. So we're going to be looking at these two different contrasting terminologies, even though in the media, they do not differentiate between Catholic integralism versus Protestant Christian nationalism. But these are two important expressions that we ought to know. Is that the pairing you had in mind, as we're saying, we are thinking about Rushdoony and Reconstructionism. So that's what we're thinking of. So let's get into the conversation. Many people throw these labels around interchangeably, right, as the media does, but they are not the same thing. So in today's discussion, let's carefully define the major groups, their goals, and what they believe. First, let's start with Christian nationalism. Christian nationalism is the belief that Christianity should play a central role in shaping the culture, laws, and identity of a nation. In the American context, Christian nationalists often argue that the United States was founded on Christian principles and that those Christian principles should continue to guide public life. Now, Christian nationalism is a broad umbrella. Not everyone within the movement agrees on every issue. Some simply want Christian values to have greater influence in society. Others want a more formal relationship between Christianity and government. The key point is that Christian nationalists generally believe religion cannot be separated from politics because every society operates according to some moral vision. And we get our morals from religion, whether we like it or not. The second group is integralism. Integralism is primarily associated with certain Catholic thinkers. Integralists argue that politics should ultimately be subordinate to spiritual truth. That is what the Catholics believe. They reject the idea that religion and politics can be completely separated. And that is why we have the papal Roman Empire, where it was a religio-political institution. They believe that society should be ordered toward the common good and that Christianity should help shape public life. Now, I don't know if when you were in watching Biden when he was in the presidency and he was a Catholic president, he kept on talking about the common good. And many Catholics do talk about it. People don't understand what it means, but that is what they mean, that religion and politics cannot be separated. That is the fundamental belief of most Catholics. Integralists are often critical of liberal democracy because they believe it treats religion as merely a private matter. They argue that if Christianity is true, then it should influence every sphere of life, including politics. However, integralists do not necessarily advocate a modern theocracy. Rather, they envision a society in which civil authority and religious authority cooperate. Right? And that is what many Catholics call for. But if you read the history of Catholicism, you understand that they think the church is superior to the state. Catholics believe that the church is actually superior to the state, to the government. Protestants, the sort of Protestant evangelical, what you call now Christian nationalism, they believe that politics should be superior to the church. In other words, the church should conform to the government, right? That is the brand that Trump has in mind, that he is king and everything else should follow his diktats, right? Third, we have Christian Reconstructionism. This movement emerged largely through the work of R.J. Rushdoony and later Gary North, or Gary if you want to call him that way. Reconstructionists argue that biblical law should serve as the foundation for society. They believe modern secular governments have abandoned God's standards and that society should gradually be reconstructed according to biblical principles. Reconstructionism places heavy emphasis on Old Testament law and has been one of the most controversial movements with conservative Christianity. Now, for those of you who don't understand the history of the United States, in the 1950s, 60s, they were moving into this liberal, what we call hippie sort of world, where it was the age of the rock and people were more secular and religion should take a back seat. Now, this is the society that we have inherited. And many people are suggesting that we have lost values, and they're saying the society cannot continue if we have this sort of very weak society that does not know the difference between what is right or wrong. Even with our politicians, we complain a lot of times that they are doing things that are not morally right, that are not ethical, but they are part of us. They come from us, and they're coming from a system that who really determines what is moral and what is immoral, right? Even in churches now, people are suggesting, who are you to tell me? And according to the culture that I come from, that the Bible says this or says that. So who has the final authority where moral acts and deeds are concerned? These are some very critical questions that we have to ask ourselves in tonight's discussion. Although Reconstructionism has never become a mass movement, its ideas have influenced broader discussions about Christianity and politics. Fourth, we have dominionism. And make sure you're writing down these words because they're important. But as you begin to see what is happening in politics, you can read the policies that they're formulating. And some of these things you are going to see that's the road that they're leading you down to. They won't tell you that, but you can perceive that that's exactly what they are doing. Very important that you understand these issues. Now, we have dominionism is often misunderstood because it is frequently used as a catch-all term by critics, right? So we have the term comes from the biblical idea that humanity was given dominion over the earth, right? That some people were given dominion, humanity were given dominion over the earth. In political discussions, dominionism usually refers to Christians who believe believers should actively influence major institutions such as government, education, media, business, family, religion, and culture. And I think that Trump has some elements of that in his administration too, in saying that in other words, dominionism is that the church should stand at the helm of the state or at the head of the state. All right. So some dominionists, and make sure you're educating yourselves, ladies and gentlemen. Make sure you're liking the videos. You are also sharing the video. Remember now that you are not going to get this at anywhere on any major platform. So you need to learn, because these things are among us. Many of you are not reading the sort of, the insinuations and also the policies that are coming out. So we have to learn from these definitions. Some dominionists believe Christians should seek leadership positions within society in order to advance Christian values. And we can think about Ben Carson here, who suggests that that is what we should do, right? And that is why he was seeking the presidency of the United States. And he himself is on board suggesting that there is no difference, or there is nothing in the Constitution which suggests the separation of church and state. All right, so Ben Carson is on record of saying that he thinks the society is unraveling and that they need to go back to the foundations of religion, or America's religious Christianity, as far as he is concerned. However, many Christians reject the label, even when they support strong Christian involvement in public life. So what we're seeing here is that not all Christians are grouped in the same sort of label as the media like to do. You have several different outlooks and perspectives even among Christians, and some might interlap, right? Just like people say people are black and white and you have this, that everybody behaves the same way. It doesn't work like that, all right? And that is what you have to understand. And I'm finding it very difficult to help Caribbean citizens to understand that they need to learn to think in a nuanced and textured manner. Many of us have been miseducated, and as a result of that, we just think that this is what it is, black and white, and I don't want to hear anything about it, when you don't know anything about it. And that's a sad thing. Now, fifth, we have the post-liberalism. This is one of the fastest growing intellectual movements today. Post-liberals argue that modern liberalism has failed. They point to declining social trust that we are going through now, weakening families, growing political polarization, rising loneliness, and cultural fragmentation, right? We can say that these things are actually happening, right? We can see weakening family values. We're seeing growing political polarization. We're seeing rising loneliness. Many people are not getting married, and cultural fragmentation, where our cultures are actually fractured. And people are asking, what are we going to do? And there is no one remedy that's going to happen, and a savior comes up and save us from all of these ails. And that is why we have to look at what the root causes of Christian nationalism. Very important that we do that. Unlike some Christian nationalists, post-liberals do not always focus on nationalism. Instead, they focus on rebuilding institutions, communities, families, and moral order. Some Catholic integralists are post-liberals, but not all post-liberals are integralists. Do you see that? Let me repeat that, because sometimes you think that, I'm going through the very difficult terminologies to help you to understand and to render an intellectually charged discourse, right? Because oftentimes we just go into our discussions and we look at left and right and black and white, and things are not as easy and simplistic as you think they are. Some Catholic integralists are post-liberals, but not all post-liberals are integralists. Now, six, we have the national conservatism. National conservatism seeks to preserve national identity, as what Trump is doing there too, cultural traditions, religious heritage, borders, and sovereignty. National conservatives generally oppose globalism and argue that nations have a right to protect their own cultural and political traditions. Many national conservatives are Christians, but the movement itself is not necessarily religious. Now, let's compare these groups. We have the Christian nationalists ask, how can Christians shape the nation? Integralists ask, how should society be ordered according to Christian truth? Reconstructionists ask, how can biblical law transform society? And the dominionists ask, how can Christians influence the major institutions of society? Post-liberals ask, has liberalism failed and what should replace it? National conservative ask, how can we preserve national identity and sovereignty? Notice that these groups overlap. I repeat that. Notice that these groups overlap. There is no just one, and you can say this person is this and this person is that. Many people belong to more than one category. Listen now and make sure you're sharing the live, because this is a very intellectually charged discourse that we do not see in the Caribbean region. A Catholic integralist may also be a post-liberal. Okay? So you can be Catholic and you can be liberal, right? And we have seen that. A Christian nationalist may also be a national conservative. A Reconstructionist may support aspects of dominionism. The labels often describe different emphases rather than entirely separate camps. Now we come to the larger question, why are these movements growing? Their supporters argue that secular liberalism has produced cultural confusion. A man doesn't know the difference between a man and a woman anymore. Weakened communities. We can see that our society is in fact collapsing, declining religious participation, and political instability. Their critics argue that these movements threaten religious freedom, minority rights, and democratic institutions. This debate is not going away. It's not going anywhere, right? It's not going away. It's right here to stay, and that's why we have to be a part of that discourse, of that debate, but we have to debate intelligently. As trust in traditional institutions continue to decline, more people are asking whether modern secular societies can sustain themselves without a shared moral foundation. That question sits at the center of the Christian nationalism debate, and that's where we'll begin tonight's discussion. Which of these movements do you think offers the strongest answer to the problems facing modern society? Let me know in the chat. So let's now begin and welcome you all to this tonight's conversation, and we will begin open the chat to see what people are saying here. And we are going to have a very good night tonight. I suggest that you check out the PCA's ad interim committee's 35-page partial year-long investigation report on Christian nationalism, initiated by their General Assembly 2025. Okay. And then we have here, they also CRC SNOD 2026, still in session, just voted on 2-year study on Christian nationalism, where it will present a report to SNOD 2028. Yeah, and as I'm saying here, we also have to make sure that we understand the difference in terms of the different categories of Christian nationalism. Because what is happening, many of our so-called, even in the academy, making reports, and they are sort of putting everybody in one box and say this is that and this is the other, but it's more textured and nuanced than we think it is. These are just 2 examples of recent conservative reformed denominations in the US that are trying to define the terms in the ongoing culture war debate, given the national dynamics at play under Trump. Now, this did not start under Trump. Right? The Christian nationalism began long time ago, and that's what we are here to discuss in tonight's program. Now, important historical context, all the U.S. mainline denominations come from old world ethnic backgrounds. That is Presbyterian Scottish, Dutch Reformed Calvinist, English Episcopalian, and the Methodist Church. And that is very good information. And all of them form what we call Protestant churches. All of the US mainland denominations have had cultural war schisms over the last 2 decades. We have Baptists, Episcopalians, the Presbyterians, the Methodists, the Dutch Calvinists, United Church of Christ, and the Lutheran. Very good. Now, here what we want to ask. Now that, because sometimes people focus a lot on the conservative element, right? But we don't also look at what the left is actually doing, right? And to what extent are they also forcing people into what is called a secular religion, right? Because that is what, you get in the academies, a sort of secular religion. Now, what about the secular left in the United States? Don't they cling and advocate for a secular religion where religion is the goddess of reason, is enthroned, where the goddess of reason, I should say, is enthroned? Now, that's a criticism that many conservatives, religious thinkers, and post-liberals make, but it depends on how the terms are defined. Now, historically, there is an interesting precedent. During the French Revolution, and I want you to hear this, radicals explicitly attempted to replace Christianity with civic cults, such as the cult of reason, right? We talked about during the pandemic, the cult of science that you call scientism, right? So as the cult of reason and later the cult of the supreme being. So in 1793, Notre Dame Cathedral was famously transformed into a temple of reason, and a symbolic goddess of reason was enthroned there. So the idea of a secular movement functioning like a religion is not new, and that is what we have in politics right now in the United States today. So from the right, we have this false biblical Christian nationalism, and from the political left, we have the secular form of what you call a secular religion that they're foisting onto the people. Today, critics of the secular left often argue that secularism does not eliminate religion. It merely substitutes another moral framework. They point to things such as sacred values that cannot be questioned, heresies that result in social punishment, moral narratives about good and evil, rituals, symbols, and public confessions, a vision of redemption and social progress. From this perspective, some argue that certain forms of progressivism function as a kind of civil religion or political religion, even though they are not traditionally religious. However, supporters of the secular left would reject the characterization that they are worshiping a goddess of reason. They would argue that their positions are based on reason, evidence, human rights, and democratic principles, right? And during the pandemic, they tell us, well, we have the evidence, even when there was none. They are not advancing a religion, but protecting a pluralistic society in which people of different faiths can coexist. Criticism of these ideas is permitted even if some social environments discourage it. So that is what we need to look at, okay? That in today's world, we have two different schools of thought, right? We have from the right, we are getting what you call a biblical or a traditional religious form of Christian nationalism. On the left, we're getting a secular version of a secular religion, right? Where people are worshiping the political theories, social theories. So you find people, when they're talking about giving examples, they're referencing Karl Marx, Emil Durkheim, and they talk about these guys as if they're quoting from the Bible, right? But it's interesting to note that if you quote something from the Bible, they're going to say, oh, you are religious. I don't want to hear that. That's a book of myths, right? At the same time, people on the left, because they have a worshipful attitude toward these social theorists and these political theorists, right? Yet they quote them ad nauseum, right? And this is the contradiction that we have in our society as we speak. Okay, now the Time magazine is asking the question here, the roots of the Christian nationalism. They're giving us a historic understanding of the roots of Christian nationalism, and they say go back further than you think, right? It goes back further than we think. Many people think that it has just surfaced under Trump because of and lack of education. Across the last few decades in the US, we have experienced widespread debates and even violent conflicts over American history. The Time magazine suggests battles range when cultural convulsions shake the foundations of old ways of knowing and living. Identity, rather than policy, drives divisions. History becomes the new front line in the cultural wars, as claims about who we are as an age inevitably turn on competing narratives about when and how we arrived at this place. And many Americans do not understand what we mean by Christian nationalism. And I shall give you some statistics in terms of the numbers of people in the US, according to census, not understanding what the nation is all about in terms of its religion. Now, the term white Christian nationalism has recently emerged in the social sciences and the media as a way of describing the worldview that has burst onto the public stage with Trumpism and the Make America Great Again movement. The toxic blend of ethno-religious identity policies reflected in the prayers and religious symbols participants carried at the U.S. Capitol insurrection on January 6, 2021, and it has become central to the trajectory of the contemporary Republican Party, 2/3 of whom identify as white and Christian. But if we see these recent trends against the long backdrop of Western history, we can see that phenomenon this term describes has far deeper roots than the post-Obama MAGA backlash. Our two political parties are increasingly animated by two starkly conflicting moral visions that have struggled for ascendancy since the first Europeans landed on these shores 5 centuries ago. Is America a divinely ordained promised land for European Christians, or is America a pluralistic democracy where all stand on equal footing as citizens? Most Americans embrace the latter vision, but a desperate, defensive, mostly white Christian minority continue to cling to the former. And notice to say Christian minority, not Christian majority. Okay? To fully understand the deep, let me get this off the screen, the deep roots of today's white Christian nationalism, we need to go back at least to 1493. Where do we need to go back to? 1493, not the year Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue, but the year in which he returned to a hero's welcome in Spain, bringing with him gold and brightly colored parrots and nearly a dozen captive indigenous people. It was also the year he was commissioned to return to the Americas with a much larger fleet of 17 ships, nearly 1,500 men, and more than a dozen priests to spread the conversion of indigenous people who inhabited what he, along with King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, still believed were Asian shores. Right, so that was the beginning of what is known as the Christian nationalism. But hear what the Time newspaper is suggesting, the Time magazine rather. The return of Columbus in 1493 also precipitated one of the most fateful but unacknowledged theological developments in the history of the Western Christian Church, the creation of what has come to be known as the doctrine of discovery. Please write that down and go and read up on that. The doctrine of discovery. Established in a series of 15th century papal bulls, official edicts that carry the full weight of church and papal authority, the doctrine claims that European civilization and Western Christianity are superior to all other cultures. All right, did you hear that? The bull, the papal bull that came from the Vatican, from the Roman Catholic papacy, suggested that Christianity and the Western cultures are superior to all other cultures, races, and religions. From this premise, it follows that domination and colonial conquest were merely the means of improving, if not temporal, then the eternal lot of indigenous peoples. So conceived, no earthly atrocities could possibly tilt the scales of injustice, or the scale of justice, rather, against these immeasurable goods. The doctrine of discovery merged the interests of European imperialism, including the African slave trade, with Christian missionary zeal, dom diversas, the initial edict that led the theological and political foundations for the doctrine was issued by Pope Nicholas V on June 18th, 1452. Why are we not talking about these things? Tomorrow is June 18th, right? We should be celebrating and talking about what that edict said, what it said and what it meant, and how it transformed the Western world and the world in which you and I live at the moment. It explicitly granted Portuguese King Alfonso V the following rights. Listen to the rights: to invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue all Saracens or Muslims and pagans whatsoever. And pagans mean people who are not Christians, right? And other enemies of Christ wheresoever placed. And the kingdoms, dukedoms, principalities, dominions, possessions, and all movable and immovable goods whatsoever held and possessed by them, and to reduce their persons to perpetual slavery, which actually came about. Right? The papal decree and others that extended and developed its principles provided the moral and religious justification for an unfettered European colonial race for undiscovered lands and fertilized the blossoming African slave trade. The most relevant papal edict for the American context was the bull Inter Caetera, issued by Pope Alexander VI in May 1493, with the express purpose of validating Spain's ownership rights of lands in the Americas following the voyages of Columbus and the year before. It praised Columbus and again affirmed the church's blessing of and interest in political conquest, that in our times, especially the Catholic faith and the Christian religion, be exalted and be everywhere increased and spread, that the health of souls may be cared for, and that the barbarous nations be overthrown and brought to the faith itself. So here we're seeing that this is not just coming from just yesteryear, right? Even during the doctrine of discovery, when the Americas were founded, we have these religious entity, the Catholic Church, the papacy, was suggesting that, of course, that's law for Europeans to enslave, right, all of these peoples in this side of the hemisphere. Now, as I've continued my own re-education, listen to what he's saying. As I have continued my own re-education journey over the last 10 years, I have come to consider the doctrine of discovery as a kind of Rosetta Stone for understanding the deep structure of European political and religious worldviews we have inherited in this country. The doctrine of discovery furnished the foundational lie that America was discovered and enshrined the noble innocence of pioneers in the story we white Christian Americans have told about ourselves. Ideas such as manifest destiny, all right, we talked about that before, America as a city on a hill, or America as a new Zion all sprouted from the seed that was planted in 1493. This sense of divine entitlement of European Christian chosenness has shaped the worldview of most white Americans and thereby influenced key events, policies, and laws throughout American history. But it's not only white Americans now. Blacks talk like that now, Hispanics speak like that. Just speak to Americans in general, and they will give you that impression that something is special about America and that she is the city on the hill, right? Because we live and we learn, and people tend to follow what they learn from their culture, right? And that is where now people talk about the America's exceptionalism. The contemporary currency of this worldview is reflected in the telling results of a 2023 Christian Nationalism survey. Listen to the survey conducted by PRRI in partnership with the Brookings Institution. Do you ever agree or disagree that God intended America to be a new promised land where European Christians and could create a society that could be an example to the rest of the world. The survey found that while only 3 in 10 Americans agreed with this statement, majorities of Republicans, 52%, and white evangelical Protestants, 56%, affirmed it. Moreover, the survey found that among white Americans today, this belief in America as a divinely ordained white Christian nation, one that has blessed so much brutality in our history, is strongly linked to denials and structural racism, anti-immigrant sentiment, anti-Semitism, and the anti-LGBTQ plus sentiment, support for patriarchal gender roles, and the list continues of what they're suggesting here. Now, our current conflicts and contradictions are clear signs that we are experiencing a significant new moment in our nation's history. If we are to get our collective bearings, we must be able to see that the histories of oppression in our country flow from the same source. The compartmentalization of history focused on the plight of specific oppressed groups, the genocide and displacement of Native Americans, or the enslavement and lynching of African Americans, has some advantages for specific people groups insofar as it centers their struggle for justice, right? For justice. So we're seeing this Christian nationalism, something that was founded way back. And we can talk about the Pilgrims, the Puritans, when they went to the United States, and how much that they were anti anyone that were not Christian, particularly of their faith, right? Particularly of their faith, they would actually suggest that they are not going to be able to live in America. Now, let us look at some of your comments. We have mainline left was emergent movement that fizzled out under neo-atheist rise in Oz, was a postmodern Christian movement that sought to reshape church practices, theology, and civics. Okay, very good historical foundation. The 4 horsemen of brand of new atheism was overtaken by the Jordan Peterson sphere. Yeah, but what we're seeing now in America is that we're seeing now this takeover of the secular religion, the secular sort of, that this is the God of reason, as it were. And people are rejecting that. They're suggesting that there's something that we need, something that is lacking in society, and that society needs to go back to something that is morally based, that has a moral fiber. And many teachers are crying out, doctors are crying out for it. And if we do not understand, and if we do not try to understand each other, the role that secularism plays, the role that religion plays, our societies are going to collapse. In fact, they are on the verge of a total collapse, because I think that we are all cursing each other out rather than uniting to understand that different institutions play different sort of roles. Very important that we understand that. Let me continue to read some of the comments before we go back to our, Now, Father Richard Roher, Franciscan Episcopalian, were the godfather and godmother of the emergent movement, otherwise known as the New Reformation. Yes. Now, I want you to make some connection to what is happening now, though, in our society. But these are very good sort of historical perspective that you're giving. Roman theocracy is the roots of church versus state debate, which means rule of 4, referring to the division of an organization or government into 4 emperors. Now, it's interesting to note that we are living in a time when our school systems are so empty and are not giving our children anything in terms of understanding the real history of Western civilization. And as a result of that, we are just getting one mode of education, right? One perspective. People think that they're intelligent. People think that they're bright. At the end of the day, they leave empty, and they are not able to look at Western civilization, understanding that lots of the fortunes, a lot of the progress that we have made come from different sources. It's come from science, came from religion, came from social theories, came from psychology, but people are just very narrow-minded, and as a result of that, they are just listening to the media that are dividing them into different camps. Tetrarchy evolved into pentarchy. The five ancient patriarchates sees of early Christianity: Rome, Constantinople, Alexandria, Antioch, and Jerusalem, major center of ecclesiastical authority. All right, so we're looking at now let us look at another article that came about from this very important thing. We're looking at the roots of Christian nationalism in the United States. And here we have the imaginary history of Christian nationalism, right? Now, the church faces no crisis more urgent than that posed by Christian nationalism, born out of an infernal blend of political authoritarianism, fundamentalism, racism, and all of that. Christian nationalism is on the rise in many countries around the world today. So it's not only in the United States, but it's around the world because people are losing faith in the political system. People are losing faith in the political, economic, cultural, and social systems of government. All right? When they gain power, Christian nationalists restrict the rights of women and girls, pass profoundly racist policies, systematically favor Christian churches for at least those that support their version, and valorize corrupt leaders who hoard power and dismiss democratic norms. Now, what can we say from this first article and the first paragraph? I think we'd like to say here that many people think that racism only comes from Christians or religion. But do you know that racism comes out of science too? Right? We talk about the fear of evolution. And one of the reasons why that came about was because they realized that do you know that during the Civil War, there was this sort of movement by the plantocracy that, religion does not justify slavery the way they would like it to justify it. Because slavery, the Bible, of course, does not, sanction slavery. And they realize that, the slaves are now beginning to understand that, the Bible is not sanctioning slavery. So they're going to need something more concrete. They are going to need something more concrete to suggest that slavery is logical, that slavery is actually real and can be done. And what do they use? Science. And they used the theory of evolution to say that, look at what you're saying. Science has backed it up. Science has backed up that Black people of African descent, are racist. And that's why many people are looking at, even in the United States, the difference between the Republicans and the Democrats. And they think that the Republicans are the ones who are racist. And they don't know that the racism also is among the Democrats. It's just the way in which they do it. And I remember during the pandemic also, they were using the vaccines. And first of all, the Democrats came out with Black people and the fear that, Black people's DNAs are different and they're going to need some help in protecting them, from the virus. So they came with a lot of scientific reasonings, right, to ensure that people are actually debased and saying that Black people are different and Black people are this and Black people are that. So we must understand that racism is also supported by both the right, those who are on the religious, the bandwagon, and those who are also on the bandwagon of the goddess of reason, the goddess of logic, as you call it, right? Or as they will call it, right? Everything is evidence. Where is the evidence? Now, that's another thing we also have to talk about in tonight's discussion. People talk about where is the evidence? Now, we know that we don't only learn through everything. We can't prove everything. Do you know that? Everything is not learned by evidence, but it's also learned through experience, right? And it's also learned through knowledge, right? And just common sense and intuition. We have to, these are the things that we have to, for example, a doctor might use science in terms of, trying to help a patient, but there are two aspects to it. What he understands about the disease and the scientific information that he has gleaned, right? That is what we call science. But then the doctor has to use the art of medicine when he now tries to apply his understanding of the disease and what is the correct medication for that particular patient. You cannot say, therefore, that one drug suits all, right? And this is where people were arguing during the pandemic that science does not necessarily mean that you must not use your common sense and also project your opinions, because that's what the doctor does. Or having analyzed the scientific data, then he or she must look at what the problem is and how it can be solved. And that is where he or she is going to be able to use his or her common sense, or what is known intuition, opinion, value judgment, as it were. Okay, very important that you understand this sort of information. Okay, so let's go back to the next point here on that you had here on the chat. Let me get you back active. All right, so we have Fangzi is saying Orthodoxy split with Oriental before the Great Schism between Orthodox and Catholicism. That is Roman Christian imperialism and Anglican split launched Reformation, leading to revolutionary nationalism. We want you to stick to the topic now at hand. Let's stick to the topic. We dealt with this on Sunday, but let us stick to the topic of the Christian nationalism, the rise of the Christian nationalism in the United States of America. We can't be over the place. We've got to get our brain focused. Now, we have Christian nationalists are fond of arguing that they have history on the side of their theology. The concentration of power in a solitary executive who favors Christian ideals and organizations is not just the historical norm, but it is in fact ordained by God for the good of all. So if you search the most dismal subreddits, you can find some particularly brazen versions of this argument. More public figures make slightly more measured arguments, but the message is the same. Christians were ordained by God to take the reins of political leadership. Now, do you think that that is true? What is your understanding of Christian nationalism? Do you think that Christian nationalism has a place in society? I want to hear from you, right? Because we are joining a conversation. If not, I can end the program and go to my bed. Right? So you need to get your thoughts together. I'm not here to come and feed you. You have to join in the conversation and let us know that it is interactive, right? So what do you think? What is your understanding of Christian nationalism? And do you think that it does play a role, or should religion be kept entirely out of politics? What is your understanding of the roles of religion and politics? Let me hear from you. Let's get into the conversation. I'm tired of talking right now. I think I've spoken enough. So we have the Democrats were the Klan and the Republicans were the mafia until the Dixiecrat flip prior to civil rights movement. Okay, we're looking at Christian nationalism from Rome to Trump. We're looking at the progression of Christian nationalism, and we're trying to look at how it came about. How did we move? People are still thinking that it just came up under Trump because of a lack of reasoning and understanding. We are trying now to look at the roots of Christian nationalism and where this may end up, because it's going to end up somewhere. And it's going to end up somewhere that you and I are not going to like. All right. And that is why it might be one of the most important lives we're having tonight. Now, race, let me get to what you're saying here before. Race was an 18th century German Enlightenment natural science concept adopted by jurisprudence civics, that is social Darwinism and eugenics. Right. So science was used, in other words, to justify, the whole matter of, black people are essentially, or people of color are essentially inferior because science says so. Remember now that religion was used before science. But as people became more enlightened, particularly in America, remember now that America was the country where the Bible was read and people have access to the Bible more than any other country in the world. Even today, more people have access to the Bible than any other country in the world in the United States. So back then, not now, back then they would read the Bible as their main text. That was what was in the home, the Bible. So as people began to read the Bible, they saw that there was not sufficient justification for the institution of slavery. So they said, now we have to go now to science, because science, people love science, and people will think that this science is built on reason, it's built on logic. So they're saying, let's go there. And that is how we have the theory of the race theory and the theory of eugenics came about. So that is in itself a religion too. It's just a sign, what we call scientism. It's not science, it's built on what we call scientism, which is a cult of, science, if you will. Stephen Knight is saying religion should be kept out of politics. Yes, I think that is the reason that many people give. And it is a reasonable, I should say, point that people raise. The fact, however, that we have to now discuss, if we do not have any values, where are the values coming from? Where are the morals coming from? These are questions that we have to ask. Should it be kept out of politics, or should Christian values, or whatever religion you live in, whatever society, should those values and principles be used in, or should guide or state or politics? Because we cannot just say that it should just get out. Because, if you are Barbadian, right, or if you are Trinidadian, when you go to the United States, right, you might get your citizenship and become naturalized in the society. It does not mean that you are going to give everything away of your Trinidadian or your Barbadian cultural norms and values, right? You might give up some for the wholesome ones, yes, you will keep, right? And you probably will adopt some of your host country. But the fact of the matter, you can't just say to someone that they're just going to get rid, because it still forms the core of people's identity, right? Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not lie, thou shalt not commit adultery. All of these are principles, right? So should we, because we're at a point now where our politicians do not know what is right or wrong, right? And they argue with us, and they're telling us that what they're doing, they're making laws and justifying what they're doing, right, through legal frameworks and loopholes. So we have to now begin to ask our question: should religion, does it have any role to play in the state, right, in our governments? Does it or does it not? But to some extent, I agree with what Stephen Knight is saying, that religion should not be a major, the potent force over what governments do or do not do. I gave the historical context of Christian imperialism so the audience could understand how the concept of nationalism began, which became white Christian nationalism in US context. Now, we must understand that this is not only just a white Christian nationalism. There are lots of black people, as I told you, including Ben Carson's, and I'm going to give you some stats just now, who believe in the concept of Christian nationalism. So the media like to give us the illusion that it's just a white people, right? It's just because they're trying to instigate a race war, right? But this is not, it doesn't only have to do with white people. There are lots of black people, and don't call them now that they're whatever, they're whites and they're trying to be whites or whatever. It's their belief, all right? It's their belief, and we cannot deny it. And also Hispanics who have this sort of ideology. But the media, again, tend to group people in boxes and are actually brainwashing us into writing against each other. Now, we have this, Steve Knight is saying, it is all up to your interpretation. Keep it out of politics. I do not care about your relationship. But where do you think the political theories came from, Steve Knight? Where do you think the whole matter of the matter of that? Go back and read the Declaration of Independence. Let's go back to the Declaration of Independence. I'm going to see if I can find that independence. And if you can find a copy of the Constitution, let's go back to these documents and let's ask ourselves, right? Because we want to now have a very a measured discourse about what is happening. It's not just simple as that. So we say Declaration of Independence. We're looking at the Declaration of Independence signed by, and these guys, by the way, were not Christians, you know. All right, some of us think that the people like the what's his name again, the signatories to the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, you know, all of these founding fathers, many of them were not Christians. They were more deist and they were Freemasons and all of that stuff, but they understood the importance of religion. By the way, we need to also discuss the whole matter of the French Revolution. That was one of the reasons also France, many people don't talk about that, you know, but the religious element, because the church, the Catholic Church, had so much potency on the French. What the French wanted is they wanted religion to just go. Right? They wanted the total extirpation of religion. And read in the history, after they had declared in the French Parliament that religion should be extirpated, blood flew on the streets like water. And the same French people that said that burn the wretch, and by the wretch they meant Christ and God, they had to call back for religion in 1790, was it 1796 thereabout, right? Because they understood that it's almost like they had no sort of filter now. Anybody could do whatever they want to do. So we have to be careful, right? And that is why we're saying it should not be the preordained. What I think, my opinion on the matter is that the moral foundations should help to guide, but there should not be a state religion. So you should not say, therefore, that, you know, if the president is Anglican or Presbyterian or Baptist, that the church, that sort of the government should not be run by Baptists and Presbyterians, as we see there in England. In England and in many other church countries, Catholic countries, what you have is a state religion in which that religion guides the politics. So the Queen or the King of England is head of the church, right? And it means, therefore, that whatever she says, she guides the church, all right? And that is what we don't want to have, because that could now set us on a dangerous precedent. Okay? Now, listen to that. Listen to the declaration, the unanimous Declaration of the 13th United States of America. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for the people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. Hear this now. We hold these truths to be self-evident. Right? What did they say? We hold these truths to be self-evident. That all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator. And it doesn't matter, as it's saying here, they don't care if it is a Muslim or it is Hindu, they're saying your Creator. But they are acknowledging here that somebody is going to say that, you know, I belong to a certain religion, and my deity, the God that I serve, whether it's Muslim God or it's Christian God, you know, holds a higher position than the government, right? By their Creator, with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. All right. So in this Constitution, not Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, you know, the founding fathers are acknowledging that there is a supreme being that should guide people's lives. Now, that supreme being should not be the being, therefore, that is imposed on the state, right? But that it plays a role, because at the end of the day, if you are in a situation and somebody is forcing you to do that which you don't want to do, what if the state should say to you, you have to do it? The only excuse you can make is that my God tells me not to do it, or whatever God it is, right? Because outside of that religious argument, you have no other excuse. That's why some people got religious excuse. They were exempted from the what do you call it, the vaccines. Okay, so religion does play a role, right? And the politicians should understand that there is a supernatural power greater than they, right? If they don't understand that, then they are going to behave like they are the gods. And that is what is happening in our society right now. So we don't want a state church or a state religion, but we want to have a situation in which the values and people are free to practice their religion, and their religion are not disrespected, right? And people are not suggesting that because you have a religion or you're religious that you're stupid, you're simplistic, and all of that stuff. Because at the end of the day, remember now that during slavery, the only thing that they could have relied on, is that statement in the Declaration of Independence in the United States, that all men were created equal. In our British colonies, we are saying that the Wilberforce, all of these guys, these slave abolitionists, what am I saying here? These slaves abolitionists, all that they had was to say that we were created equally under God. There was not, because science did not celebrate, science did not really support the fact that we are equal. We are equal beings. And that is what we have to understand. So what are we going to use in our society now when they're telling us again, because it's almost like we're seeing the rehashing of another racial war, another racial sort of, riot or warfare, brewing. What are we going to use? What are we going to stand on? A nation is defined as a single ethnic group, but the post is defined or is not defined. A nation is defined as a single ethnic group, but the post-World War I consensus of neoliberalism pushed the nation state model with US branded democracy. They're now deconstructing international law, order. You're correct. And we have, hence the oligarchs are funding the rise of Christian nationalism to use a culture war white grievance to allow them to sneak in tech surveillance states under corporatocracy. I can't even pronounce that word. But listen to I keep on saying to you, though, that this is not just white. We are seeing even within our societies in the Caribbean a sort of erosion of moral fiber, where our politics or civilization at school, people are complaining it's not what it used to be. People don't have the morals, they don't have the sort of ethics that they normally had, which when we were a little bit more religious, our societies had those. They might not have been genuine Christians, but they acknowledged certain values that were eternal. Right now, people are more, into sports and music and, and gangsterisms and anything that is hedonistic. So how do we now begin to look at society? How do we tell our politicians that they are telling a lie? Right? Maybe nothing is wrong in lying. Right? Maybe nothing is wrong in killing. Maybe nothing is wrong in having slavery. What are we going to use as the source to tell them that what they're doing is immoral and not morally correct? Because we just can't say that it's moral. Where is it coming from? They want to know, where are you getting your ideas? Where is it rooted? Where is your belief rooted in? And if not, they're going to have the excuse to do whatever they want to do. Right? That is what we have to understand. It may be they believe, but each individual has their own interpretation. Yes, and that's why they should not have a state church. But we have to have some common, what you call it now, value system. Let us say, for example, that we were to have, in America, where you have diverse peoples of different, cultural backgrounds and religious backgrounds and everything. Everybody's in America, right? If everybody were to go there and everybody is allowed to have their cultures to predominate everything and whatever, then you'd have confusion. right? You have to have some common values that you share when you go to any place, right? You talk about, for example, in Japan, you have the Shinto religion is what gives them their national identity. In Poland, the Catholicism is what gives the Polish people their national identity, right? The Anglican Church or the Protestant values is what gives Barbadian their national identity, right? The Catholic Church gives the people here in Santo Domingo their national identity. So the United States also is suggesting that we cannot deny, while you should not have a state religion, but you cannot deny the Christian foundations on which, or the Protestant, I should say, foundations in which the society was built. The problem that we're having today is that people do not understand that we have different versions of Christianity and different denominational systems. We have the Catholics, right, which were not regarded as Christians before, right? We have the Protestants, and people cannot differentiate between. We have Pentecostals. So we have to be able to put these different groups and different sects into their respective positions, and that's how we are going to have an intelligent discourse, right? And that's what we have to understand. But this is a very, very interesting topic. Let me see. Did I miss something about this comment here? It may be right that I have their interpret. That is it. Religion is going to lead to different interpretation, and just like politics too. Look at the Constitution. The Constitution, we are now in a situation where the Constitution, people are suggesting that, oh, that's what the founding fathers meant. And then people on the right or the left say, no, that's not what they meant. They meant this. Right? So people can have, I do literature, and people have different opinions about different, poems and the figures of speech and the themes and all of that stuff. So we interpret things differently. That we cannot deny. Right? So whether it's science through science or it's religion, but it's what we need to understand. We can't, just because you have different opinions on science, and science is not united, doesn't mean that you can just put away science and say, I don't believe in science, right? We still need science as a tool to help us to discover new things and to invent new things, right? The term white Christian nationalism was coined by them during the Reconstruction era of the Klan. And that's why I gave you, I was giving the different, what you call it now, characteristics, function of Christian nationalism at the beginning of the program. It was not a leftist trope to slander conservatives. What I'm saying to you is that it is not as simple as they're dividing us into the left and the right. I gave you the dominionism, I gave you the historic foundations, and it came right from the discovery of the New World. Right? So yes, you have this play with the left versus the right, but the left also are religious in the sense that the Democratic Party, they believe that they should also impose their secularism on society. So if you don't believe that there's no difference between a man and a woman, then you're going to be punished. That is religion. That is religion too, but it's a secular religion. So both of them are religious, and they want you to accept science and the goddess of reason as your God, and that is what we call the secular religion. On the right in the United States, you have the traditionalists in terms of the traditional Christian people who talk about that, we should have the Bible and the Christian people to run the states, to rule the state, when that should not be. That is not what God says. But the fact of the matter, what is not a part of the conversation is that we still cannot say that religion does not play a role in society and in government in terms of the principles, the morals, right? But they should not be like it is the national religion and people are foisting religion on people. But to suggest that a president who has a particular belief system, right, is not going to be, influenced by his religion and his, value system is something that is ridiculous. We have to rethink our position. Yes, welcome, WHZ. Then we have here the Declaration of Independence originally said United States of America, with the United States as lowercase because the structure evolved from Association, Declaration, Confederacy. and the Federation. Correct, and that is true. We have here Swansea saying George Washington was an Episcopalian, Anglican, and a Freemason, right? So, but what I'm saying that they were not religious. In many of our presidents are not religious, but it's just the fact that they have to use it, because how many Americans would have allowed a Muslim president to go into power? Right? Remember during Obama's candidacy, they were saying, oh, he's Muslim. And that was a big thing. They don't want a Muslim. In fact, before, Catholics could not be president. Remember when the first Catholic president, the first Catholic candidate, presidential candidate that was like in the 1920s came about, it was no, we're not going to have the Pope. We're not going to have the Pope decide what's going on in the White House. Right? So it was during Kennedy, he was the first Catholic president. So when we hear, for example, the people in the United States suggesting that religion does not play any role at all, let's go back to the presidents and ask a question. Why is it that they would not want an atheist, an openly declared atheist, to be president? Why most of the presidents were Christian affiliated? We have to ask ourselves these questions. Are they hypocritical as the United States is known to be? Now, we have a situation here where we have Episcopalian has historically controlled the U.S. deep state along with other mainline denominations. The evangelicals began to rise in influence during moral majority now took over after schism. And right now, what do we have dominating? What do we have dominating now? We have the Catholic Church. This is the most Catholic presidency in the history of the United States, right? So we can see an evolution. So this is not just the United States. It is not static. It evolves. It evolves with the time. And right now we're seeing a time in which, in previous occasions, as I said before, Catholics would not have been. They were discouraged from participating in politics because of the Catholic integralist perspective that church and state should be merged. That is the Catholic understanding. Now we have moved into the 21st century where we are seeing a president of the United States having the most Catholic administrators in his administration. And that's a fact. So we are seeing some very interesting developments here in the United States. The state's constitutions were originally Christian in nature based on the mainline denomination that formed the colony. Yes, but what we're saying to you is that without that base, slavery would have been intact even today, because there was no other justification. There was no other moral explanation why slavery should not have happened in the United States, because science backed it. Logic backed it. The only thing that did not back it, and that's why were the Constitution and the Bible. And that's why it had to go. But thank God, America then was a little bit more religious than it is now. What if it was not to some extent religious then? It's now moving away from having that religious aura to being more atheistic, as the French were during the French Revolution. So if we should have slavery again, what would be the justification for not having it? Because science again is going to back it. That's for sure. Because there is no sort of upgrade here. We don't see any upgrade in the theory of evolution. It's still that black people they came from chimpanzee, right? And we developed and evolved until, Europeans at the top. Right? So there is absolutely no sort of explanation, justification why we should not have slavery in today's world. Right? That is what we have. And I think W.E. Du Bois was the person who said it in Black Reconstruction, that the Bible was the only book that was used, right, against the institution. There was nothing that supported the black man. Nothing else. Example, New Amsterdam became New York on September 8, 1664, when the English seized the Dutch settlement and renamed it in honor of Duke. So, yes, Stephen is saying, I get that. That was then, but something happening where we took a step backwards, because after that era was gone, a whole lot of people were mistreated under the guidance of these papers. Now, again, we have to understand that people interpret, as you're saying, Stephen, things in a different way. People were mistreated, as you're saying, with the Bible, right? But was the Bible was wrong, or the interpretation of the misinterpretation of the Bible? So people can misinterpret the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, history, anything, the news, right? But does it mean, therefore, that the facts are still not binding, that the facts are still not important? Right? And that's what we're saying. That is one thing to have something, another thing is to misinterpret it and to weaponize it against someone else. But if we don't understand it and get the facts and get the truth from that thing, and how will we get the truth if we don't have it? And that's the question. How are we going to improve our societies if we lack morals? How are we going to improve our society if we don't have a standard and common values on which our societies can be glued? Right? These are what we're saying. And right now in our society, there seems to be no sort of, solution to the decadence, the social and political decadence in our societies. Doesn't seem to be anything, nothing. Then we have Episcopalians split, and the Conservatives formed the ACNA, which has launched the GAFCON movement to fight the traditional Anglican communion in Global South region. Now, we have here, will you listen to some of these talking heads in the mainstream media? They are talking about white Christian nationalism. Yeah, that is what they want. They're talking about. But what I'm saying to you is that it is more than that. It's more than white Christian nationalism, because there are lots of Black people and Hispanics who support it. In fact, let me give you some statistics here, because the media houses are not giving you the right thing. They're not even in the first segment of my program. I was giving you the different characterization and the categories of Christian nationalism, and that is, but they're not giving you that. They're just giving you the sweeping generalization and putting people into boxes, which that is not so. Now, listen to this. Christianity's place in politics and Christian nationalism. Now, listen to what they're saying. Most Americans express support for the principle of separation of church and state. That's most Americans. And few say that they think the federal government should declare Christianity to be the official religion of the United States, which I agree with them, right? The United States should not declare the Christian religion as the official religion of the state. But many Americans do not think that even though the U.S. shouldn't officially be declared as a Christian country, the federal government should promote Christian moral values. And that's two things. We have two conversations here. We have a situation in which Christianity should not be declared as an official religion of the United States. However, it does not negate the fact that the government should help to promote Christian moral values, because nothing is wrong with them. Nothing is wrong with having good Christian moral values. Thou shalt not steal, right? Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's goods and wife, and and all of that stuff. These are things that we want to have. They are good moral values. And half of U.S. adults say they think the Bible should have at least some influence in U.S. laws, including 28% who say that if the Bible conflicts with the will of the people, the Bible should have more sway. Now, the question is, if we don't have some sort of religious fiber, religious foundation, how are we going to say what we need to do, what is right or what is wrong? How do we know what is right and what is wrong? Because many of us, our understanding of morality came from the Christian religion, right? That is where it came from, if we're truthful to ourselves. Now, if we, just like France, if we say that it should go, what's going to happen to society? Now, fewer than half of U.S. adults say they have ever heard or read, listen to this, fewer than half of U.S. adults say they have ever read anything, they have ever heard or read anything about Christian nationalism, right? Including 5% who say they have a favorable view of it, and 25% who say they have an unfavorable view of it. So many Americans don't even know what it means. as a Christian nationalist. They hear it on the media, but they don't understand. Now, US adults are divided over the amount of influence the Bible should have on the country's laws. About half of adults, that's 49%, say the Bible should have a great deal, 23%, or some influence, 26%, while 51% say it should have not much or none at all. Okay? Now, hear what they're saying about the different ethnic groups. I want you to listen keenly to that. Respondents who said the Bible should have at least some influence on US laws were asked a follow-up question. When the Bible and the will of the people conflict with each other, which should have more influence? Overall, 28% of US adults say the Bible should have influence over US laws and that it should take priority over the will of the people if the two conflict, while 19% say the Bible should have influence but that the will of the people should take precedence. White evangelical Protestants and Hispanic Protestants are more likely than those in other religious groups to say the Bible should carry more weight in US laws than the will of the people. 64% and 61% respectively say the Bible. So that's 64% of whites and 61% of Latinos or Hispanics say that the Bible should predominate. And the Bible should have more influence on laws when the Bible and the will of the people conflict. And listen to this, and 49% of Black Protestants voice this opinion. Right? So it means that 49% of Blacks also agree that the morality, Christianity should play a very important role in guiding the sort of morality of the state. Now, Fongzi is saying, do I come off as a simplistic reductionist? I can only type so much in a social media blurb. I never said there's only one version of Christian nationalism. You seem to want to strawman my take. Yeah, you are coming off as that. That is just the white leftist tropes against the right-wing people. And I'm suggesting to you that it is rather more complex than the media houses and history books sometimes are giving us. I never said religion doesn't play a role. You obviously have an agenda for the direction you want the narrative to go in. I'm not suggesting, I don't have any agenda, right? You are just writing some very disjointed information. I'm saying connect your ideas and form them into something coherent. I can't get what you're saying if your ideas are not coherently expressed. I thought we were having a dialogue, but you keep wanting to downplay my remark. I'm not downplaying your remarks. I'm saying make your remarks clearly expressed and coherent. They're rather disjointed. So we have here that Steve Knight is saying, yeah, the Catholic may be in charge now, but the people in the White House seem to have a different interpretation of what being a Catholic is. Now, one of the things that is interesting is, as we're saying, Stephen, that wherever the Catholic is, they think that they are superior to the state. We call them the integralists. I wanted to go up and look at that word, integralists. That's what they, and then we looked at dominionism. We looked at other branches, conservative, white, national, Christian nationalism. So there are very different, what you call it, characteristics and categories of this sort of, Christian nationalism. Now, some people just like to say it's white nationalists versus, the people. And that the white nationalists want, Black people to get out and whatever. That is how the media describes it. But I'm saying to you that we want to have a conversation in which we are looking at the fact that we don't want, as you're saying, Stephen Knight, any religion to predominate and to say that it is the religion of the state, whether it's Anglican, Presbyterian, Jehovah's Witnesses, Seventh Adventist, Baptist. That should not be. What we're saying is that in the media and in the academy, for the most part, they are suggesting that religion does not play any role or should not. Okay, it should be completely extirpated. And I am asking, if it is extirpated, and how are you going to separate entirely the values of a religion from the day-to-day task of the people? And how do we know, how can we say to them when they've done something wrong, right? They're killing many people abroad. What are we going to use as the justification to tell them that thou shalt not kill? Where is that coming from? Right? What if they're saying that, yes, if we don't have religion, then the government, the president has all rights to kill, has all rights to go to war because he is the head of state, right? And that he is the commander in chief. But we're saying, just like during slavery, the only justification for the end of slavery was the fact that the Bible says that it is not right and we're all equal in his sight, as the Constitution said, that all men are created equally and their creator has endowed them with that right. Not that the government endows us with that. But the people now who do not want to, if we disregard religion, then what evidence, what sort of justification are we going to use to say that that is so, that it should not be done? We won't have anything. And the government is going to predominate. Okay? The deep state has been shared between mainline, evangelical, Catholic, and Judaism, and now the mainline has split, right? The liberals are being pushed out of control as they had been historically. But the liberals, as we're suggesting here, Fongzi, are also have an agenda that is different. That is the same thing. They have what you call a secularist religion. And their secularist religion means that they are going to foist their goddess of reason, which is also a secular god, on you, or a secular goddess. So the two are the same. It's only their approach are different. That's what I'm trying to say to you guys here now. That on the right, we have the traditionalist Christian dominionists, if you will. Those who want to foist that God should be, everybody should be Christians, which should not be. Everybody should decide. But on the other hand, you have also left-wing people who are not traditionally religious, but are following a secular religion, right? And they are foisting their ideas about, evolution, the theory of evolution. They're foisting their ideas about the difference between a man and a woman. And if you don't accept it, you can also come into problems with the law. So I'm saying to you that both are wrong. And both have Christian overtures. They are religious, but one is more traditionalist and the other has a secular fragrance. And what I'm saying to you, but both are essentially religious, because the goddess of reason is a pagan deity, right? And pagan. In other words, all nations, let me just put it all clearly, there is no entirely secularist nation. There's none. I think that is the standard. If people were more wholesome, if people were fair, if we're living in normal societies, but we're not, right? We're not living in normal societies. So we need something bigger than government, to say higher than government, so that when they do something that is wrong, we can say that it is wrong, and that they have to respect us because we hold something higher. We hold on to something higher, just like the slaves did, than the moral laws of government. That the moral laws of a deity, whatever your deity is, of the creator, as the founding fathers used, okay, is higher than the laws of government. If we understand that, if a society is built on that, then they will respect every citizen in that society. And that's what I'm saying. So they're attempting to remove birthright, citizenship, and jus soli versus jus sanguinis. All of them are trying to do that. And remember now that all of these laws are being set and being implemented to use against those of us who do not follow what they want us to do when the New World Order is actually implemented. Remember that in the pandemic, the nurses and the doctors who were there before the vaccines were actually, before they came on the market, many of these nurses and doctors, they were on the front line and they risked their lives, right, in the protection and the care of these people who were infected with the virus. And what happened eventually? When the time of the vaccines came, they were now, from these people who were heroes, they became now people who were despised by the system. So yes, so the same way that you are going to see the right-wing people behave, the left-wing people are going to behave the same way. All right. So we tend to divide ourselves into camp, but the agenda is the same. Both are religious. One belongs to a traditional religious sect, the other to a secular religious sect. We should not be in any camp, in any of those two camps. However, what we want to have is a discussion that, is nuanced, which says, what role should religion play? And some say that it should play none. I am saying that it has a role to play, but it should not be a sort of that it should be forced or foisted. You should not have a state religion that forces everybody to adopt, whatever religion that the state is advocating. But in terms of principles, in terms of morality, you're going to have something, because morality, values come from religions, right? They don't come from science. They don't come from, these social theorists, from Charles Darwin. They don't come from the guy there of the Communist Manifesto. And that is what many people ask when they read the Communist Manifesto, right? There is no sense of morality in it. It lacks that. You have to have it. Societies have to be glued. Without that moral component, or civilization is going to totally be extirpated, right? And that is what we have to understand. And it's not that we're thinking, every time we think about religion, we just think about in this very narrow understanding, and the Bible too, that this is what it is and it's not that. When we just don't know, because many of us have not yet studied it. Many of us have not read the history of religion and see that all societies in the world have been religious. You tell me which society weren't, from Egypt to Babylon to the countries in Africa, have always been religious. Okay? Now, in the Western tradition, the Protestant Western tradition, they're the only ones who say that one branch of religion should not be imposed upon an entire populace, right? So we have to give Western civilizations credit for that, and that all religions should be respected. Okay? In many other religions, all religions are not respected. Right? Even though because they have their state religion, which might be the Muslim religion, which might be the Catholic religion, which might be the Anglican religion. So these are the things now we have to enlighten ourselves. And this is a very difficult conversation. So I don't have an agenda. What I'm trying to help you to understand that it is not as simplistic as the media houses are suggesting, and academia also are suggesting, that it's just one group versus the other. Because many groups interlap. The Dominionist with the Integralist, with the white Protestants, with Hispanic Protestants, right? With Catholics, they might interlap and share some of the sort of principles outlined in different categories. Okay, but we have to look at all of these categories and look closely and broadly at the role that religion plays in our society. And then we have, did I read this already? Your agenda seems to try and steer the audience into your own politics. You are trying to steer that because you are giving us this very narrow understanding. I'm saying that I'm neither, none, or the other. And you're telling me I'm steering. Where am I steering? I'm steering it into understanding more broadly what it is all about. You're not saying anything here that is trying to get the people to understand what we're saying. I'm saying that I'm neither. I'm neither for the right or the left. But I'm suggesting to you that to reason as narrowly as history is suggesting about these two camps is not going to help us to understand the topic. All right? The topic is much more complex, much more textured, much more nuanced. And you are staring, and I'm sure many of the people are not understanding what you're saying, Fong. So you have to be able to connect the dots a little bit more better, which sometimes you're disjointed in what you're saying. It's fine for you to have your own beliefs, and that is what you do have, and that's why I'm expressing. All of us here have our own beliefs, including you. But how you position your remarks will push away adept thinkers. But I'm not sure these people, what you're saying is really adept. Right? You're giving us some historical, but you're not making the connection. That's what we want. You're adept mean making connections and a lot of your comments are disjointed. Christ is king, or no buy, no sell. Well, the fact of the matter is that who is the king? Is Christ the king, or is the government the king? Right, and that is what they are leading to. The whole matter of the rights, this thing about Christian nationalism, the state wants to be the king. The president is going to be the king because it says it's the number of a man. It's not the number of Christ. It is the number of a man, and that the man is going to ask you, right, to worship him. So the state is going to ask you to worship it. Right? So it has nothing to do with worshiping God. What Trump, the Christian nationalism, has nothing to do with worshiping God. The deception, and that is the deception. The deception is that they are preparing and conditioning you to worship the state, whether it's through science, the goddess of reason, or through a pagan deity, man himself, a pope or a king. And we've had that before. This is nothing new, people. This has existed before. And that's why we went back into the age of discovery, right? Where we're telling you that even in the old world and Catholicism, right, that the kings saw it as their divine right to rule. The Pope considers himself to be what? The God, the vicar of Christ on earth. So you're not worshiping Christ here as far as they're concerned. It has nothing to do with the Bible, but they're using the Bible as a way to deceive people to believe that they want you to get back to Christian principles, right? So when Fongs is suggesting that I'm trying to get you, there's no agenda, because I'm telling you that both are wrong. I'm trying to uncover and to unmask the deception rather, on both sides of the political spectrum. Well, you're not saying anything, Fongs. Enjoy your not wanting to understand, because your points are not very coherent. Then we have Michael Smith is saying President Trump set up through executive order the Office of Anti-Christian Bias Director Reverend Paula White to go after another who speaks against Christ. Right, but that is what they're using, Michael. They're using Christ as the what? As the pretext. But that is not because if you talk about the New Age Christ, they're not talking about the Christ of heaven. Because if they were to read their Bible and they understand their Bible, they understand that Christ does not want to be enthroned in this world. Because the Bible says that my kingdom is not of this world. So this Christ that he's trying to enthrone is not the real Christ. And that is the whole matter of deception. And so I'm trying here to unpack that, to let you know that it's just being used. Just like they use the Bible to say that God said slavery is permissible, and when the slaves read it, the ones who actually were free, they understood that the Bible did not say anything like that, and they were empowered by what the Bible said. So what we are seeing here, the Bible and Christianity and science, just science too, and just open up your minds, guys, and listen. Science is also being used, and nothing is wrong with science. Science has a role, and do you know, because of what has happened in the pandemic, many people are against science now, and they're saying, I don't care about the doctor, I don't care about medicine, I don't care about science, I don't want to hear anything about science. Is science relevant? Yes. Does science play a role in society? Yes. Should it be used as a weapon and be foisted upon people to do what they don't want to do? No. And that's the same thing we're talking about religion. So religion, the science does play a role in any state. Religion does play a role too, but neither should be used, right, to suggest. So the theory of evolution should not be foisted upon people. In our schools today, can you have any discussion on creation? No. Why? Because they're saying that creation, that creation story is a myth, that it is not scientifically sound. Okay, that's okay if you say that. But if it is so, why not introduce the kids to it and say that this is another version of how the world came into existence? Because the left is also foisting that onto you as a religion. that outside of that, there's no other beginning of the world. And that is what they're saying. So this is a very, very complex topic. So don't listen to what they're saying and what they're doing. You have to look beneath what they're doing and say, here lies the deception. Certainly, it's not the ascension. They're not trying to elevate, as it were, Christ. Project 2025-26, Christian Nationalists say that those who do not submit to Christ will be annihilated. But the same thing I'm saying to you, look at what has happened to, do you know that, what's his name? That guy there from that writes, the journalist, the academic. What's his name again? He was saying, though, Chomsky, Noam Chomsky. During the pandemic, he said those people who did not take the vaccines should be sort of exiled to some desert or whatever. That's what he said. Coming from Noam Chomsky, an academic. So what I'm saying, he was using what he believes to be science to intimidate the people. But that was false science. The same thing, Michael, they're using false religion to say to you that any person who doesn't worship Christ, and the same thing that the left does. You don't take the vaccines, or you don't call a man and a woman, that's they're different genders, then you can also be exiled, or it's going to come. And both are playing the same game. And that's what we're saying, that one is a secular religion, the other belongs to a traditional religious camp. Okay? These people running the country don't care about religion, right? They don't care. They're just using it just like the science. Just like science, they don't care about science. You think they care about science? If they had cared about us during the pandemic and science, don't you think that they would have tolerated differences in opinions? No, but they didn't tolerate it. They were just saying that their version of science is the science. And if you did not believe that, then you are going to be like a heretic. And that's why we lost our jobs, right? You couldn't do this, you couldn't do that, you couldn't even buy groceries in some places. So what is the difference? That's what I'm saying to you, that both camps they have this sort of religious underpinnings. And that's why we have to unpack them and say that both are deceptive. So these people running the country don't care about religion. That is, they don't. The individuals who are in control do not care about religion, only the average man and woman. And that is why we have to know what religion entails, what the Bible says or what the Bible doesn't say. So when they say things like what Michael is saying, that they're saying that they're enthroned in Christ, we can say, well, the Bible says that his kingdom is not of this world. So your enthroning of Christ is not the Christ that is in the Bible, right? That is a pagan Christ. That is a new age Christ. Just like science too, when they tell us that we have to take the vaccines or anything that is medical that opposes our scientific beliefs and our understanding of science, we can tell them that that is not real science. Right? But if we don't know what it is about, if we don't read for ourselves, how are we going to challenge them? And that is what I'm saying. So that's why we have to be able to look at everything they're saying and measure it in with what the Word of God or with what religion says or doesn't say. But how many of us are able to do that? Very few. All right. I totally understand what you're saying, but again, the people who control the system do not care about religion. Hence, that's why they took it out of the school. Right. But they're telling us, well, the people that took it out of the schools were the liberals, right? The ones who, and that is why the so-called conservatives rather, the traditionalists, the ones who are, religious, traditionally, the traditional religious people, they want it to come back. Because, in other words, let me just say this. Both are operating to the extreme. Both are extremists, right? They are extremists when you look at the ones who say they want a separation of church and state. And the ones who want the complete eradication or extirpation of religion. Or the ones who say that religion and state and church should be merged. They are extremists. But what we want to have is a balanced society that recognizes the importance of religion, science, technology. Let's look at technology. We could also become agnostics at technology. We're going to have AI. I don't care about technology. It should just be totally extirpated. There are people like that. But what about our emails and things that we're doing now? These are good aspects of technology. So these are only tools I'm suggesting to us, ladies and gentlemen. These are tools. Religion is also another tool. Science is another tool, and everything depends on how we use it, and we've got to be able to use them in a way that does not suggest that we are extremists and we're taking extreme views. Oh, I don't like when it should go out. Excuse me. So where are you getting your morals? Oh, I don't like science, so it should go out. Where are you getting your sense of, inventions? How are you going to invent? Oh, I don't like technology because of AI and whatever. But how are you going to send your emails and to make your WhatsApp calls and to have your lives on YouTube? Okay? And this is what I'm saying. And we don't want to get into the camp where we're suggesting that, but all of these things, all of what technology, religion, science can be weaponized by the state against us. Does it mean that these tools are evil in essence? No. It's just that they are weaponized. And that is exactly like what I'm saying, if you understand what I mean. Yeah, so we have there, my comments have been neutral and didn't disclose my personal views as such. So you're speaking, well, people get, you don't have to tell me your personal views, right? The way how you're writing them, I can look at what you're saying and think and form my opinions of what you're saying. You're writing a lot here, Fonzie, and people will get an impression of where you're going in your discourse. Lecturing me as if I don't understand what liberal stands for is a strawman fallacy. I'm not trying to lecture you. I'm just trying here to reason, and that's what we're here to do, to reason, to say that we want to connect the dots. You're telling me I have an agenda. If I have an agenda, I would be saying I'm Republican or I'm pro-religion. I am not. I'm saying to you that none of them should predominate the state. They should be used as tools to enlighten and to give us knowledge. And we're saying that science builds. And even though it was used against us during the pandemic, we can't say that it does not have any relevancy in the state, right? It does have, but it must be controlled. And that's what I'm saying. And we shouldn't have any state religion. And I'm saying that, and I still stick to my position. How do I have an agenda? Well, I can't help you, Fancy, if you think I have an agenda. You speak to me like your audience is a condescending manners. You are superior. I'm not superior. But what I'm saying, bye, have a good one. You have lost your mind. Yeah, so we have here, now as far as we see in the Caribbean, I think we need to stop trying to follow the United States. Right, what is happening though is that, as I'm suggesting, Stephen, in our societies, whether you go to India or you go to Poland or you go any country in the world, right, all societies are built on religion, because it's almost as if people want to be able to be linked to a higher source of power and connection. So even the Freemasonry, the Illuminati, and all of these secret societies, they are religious in nature, in orientation. And as we're suggesting here, the founding fathers of the United States were Freemasons for the most part, right? All pagan societies, Babylon, Egypt, Greece, right? The Medes and the Persians, they were all religious, and their societies were built on religion. Read the history of these things. As I was saying to you, the Western societies are the only one, particularly the United States, that came about now suggesting that the society, they should have a separation of church and state, because the founding fathers understood what happened in the old world. What people are doing now, they are misinterpreting, as I'm suggesting. They're misinterpreting the understanding of what religion is. And I think we're in a society now where people don't understand religion, because our education system, as I'm saying, have indoctrinated us to think a certain way that we can just live without any morals anymore. Our society is based on economic growth, on science and technology, right? As if those things happened in a vacuum. on the Constitution just came about in a vacuum, and that people did not have religious thoughts and they did not have any religious foundation. And I'm saying that in fact, I think there's a founding father, if I can find it, and he says that the American society is going to collapse, or the Constitution, let me see if I can find it, was made for people who are religious, who are biblical, because that is the foundation that it came from. While they were not particularly religious, but they understood the importance of religion. It's almost like your parents, right? So some of your parents were not religious, they didn't go to church, but they sent you to church because they understood the values that you get from church, right? And that it can help you to grow and become a morally upstanding citizen. And the same thing that happened during, what should I say now, that happened during the formation of the Constitution. Let me see if I could find that statement by the founding fathers in saying that the Constitution were made for religious people of the United States, but one of them said it, right, for religious people. All right, so we have let me see which founding father said that. Let me see if I could get that thing up here. Founding father, U.S. founding father, U.S. founding fathers. Yeah, and then, okay, right, John Adams, right? John Adams said, listen to this. John Adams said our Constitution was made only for moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. Right? That's what he's saying. He says that the Constitution, let me read it again. John Adams, let me send it in the chat so you can see what he's saying here. So you might not believe what I'm saying. So I'm going to send it to the chat, and you will see what I'm saying. So, right. So John Adams, he's suggesting here that the Constitution, right, was made for what? Religious only. He didn't just say made only or only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. Right? Now, was he advocating that religion and politics should be merged? No. But he's saying that it has a role. It has a role. Right? It has a role. But yeah, but certainly you're not bringing anything if you are coming here to argue, Fangzi. Go ahead and go where you need to go. I'm not going to argue with people who just want to argue for nothing. Now we have the deception. The Son of Mary discuss this with anyone who is not emotional and shows decorum, no problem. The Son of Mary, who is the Son of Mary? Who is the Son of Mary? Not sure what you're saying there. And if you listen to some of these speeches by these politicians in the United States, some of them are pushing for one world religion. The entire world is moving there because remember now that they want a system of control, right? The world understands, the one world order, they understand that politics cannot unite the world, right? Politics cannot unite the world. So what they're trying to do, therefore, they're trying to use religion as the thing that glues, the glues. Why? Because when you say likewise, just like how the populace can use religion to stand up to government, the government can also use false religion to control populace. Because if they say to them, God says it's a divine right, that God says you have to do it, then people get frightened and they get afraid. And that's how they listen. They're not going to listen because, Barack Obama said it. But if they could use something and say it has a moral, emphasis, like during the pandemic, we were told that if we don't take the vaccines, you're going to kill your grandmother and kill your grandfather. That also had religious underpinnings because people were scared. They were saying, am I going to kill my grandfather? Thou shalt not kill. Right? And that's exactly what they were alluding to, So, yeah, so that is what we have to do. Fangzi, bye-bye. I'm not going to argue with you. You have lost respect and you have to go. I'm not going to be arguing with somebody who is not offering anything of value to the program at the point. You were until you began to get out of character. Now, where's the next President Trump? Is it this next in let me go back to. I have to go back up. I think I've lost my thing here. Oh yeah, this is Michael. The American government vowed to continue Charlie Kirk's work and enforce the mark which Erica Kirk linked to the Son of Mary, saying that you should mark yourselves in your forehead every day with it. Right. Well, again, false religion, brain control, mind control, and that is what these guys are doing. And that is why we have to be able to read, and read the Bible for ourselves if we want to, or any religion, as a matter of fact. Even the Muslim religion, all the religions of the world, we should have a knowledge of them. So when, for example, after 9/11 and when George W. Bush was going after the Muslims, if we had understood what the Muslim religion really entailed, right, then we would not really believe what George Bush and the United States were saying. But lots of Americans, they were like, oh yes, the Muslims are coming after us, because they didn't understand what really was going on. And that's why we have to be able to understand, because religion can use, the state can use religion as a tool of control. And that is why we must be educated about it. And the more educated we are about it, the more learned we are about it, then we can say no, and we can use their lack of knowledge and their wanting to exploit us. The same thing with science, or just about anything. Just about anything. We have to be able to do that. So we have President Trump said he must bring, I think I've read this already, the homes of Americans, bringing back Christianity fast and strong to make America great again. Said that about science too, that he was going to use the vaccines, and he was going to use the army. Remember that Trump was saying during the vaccine that he was going to use the army to get the shots into the arms of everybody, right? So this is what we're saying here, that we are hearing from both sides of the mouths, right? We're hearing from the traditional religious people, and we're hearing from the secular religious ones too. The ones who think that the goddess of reason is going to be the one that we should worship, and the ones who think that we should worship a false Christ. And in that sense, Trump wants to be the Christ. Why do you think he was having that sort of image when the Pope had to sort of excoriate him? Remember when the Pope excoriated him about what he had done, and he was there over patient and hanging like he was the Christ? Because these governments also want you to worship them, right? The one world religion is going to be the worship of a man, not the Christ of the Bible. All right, and that's what we have to understand. But as I'm saying, and you're right, everybody here is right, that there should be a separation of church and state, in the sense that there ought not to be any, what you call it now, any national church, any state religion, as we have in the Catholic countries, the predominant Catholic countries, and we also have in Great Britain, where the Anglican Church is actually the head, well, the church, the state church in that particular country. Yeah, Andrew, we get it, or at least I understand what you're saying. You have people in government who can't tell you what a woman is. You're right. So what they're doing, it's almost like a what you call it, the pendulum. They're swinging the pendulum from the left to the right to the left, and the more they do that, is the more they control us. Right. So when one does that, Steve, and say that they don't know the difference between a man and a woman, then you have the next one come, oh, we need to get back to the Bible. The Bible tells us the difference between a man and a woman, and they go back and right and forth and so on. And at the end of the day, we're so tired that they have already destroyed the country and they control us. But at the end of the day, neither of them is right. The only thing they're right on is that, yes, there's a difference between a man and a woman. But the fact of the matter, the way they are going about it, to force people into believing what they want them to believe, is something that we have to reject. President Trump on Sunday, May 17, 2026, rededicated America to Christ, declaring America to be a Christian nation officially. And that's what we're saying. We're saying that this is a false Christian religion. Are you getting it, Michael? So he's saying that, just like what they say about science, right? But we have to be able to look that not because they're trying to impose a false Christian religion on us, should we say that religion should be extirpated. Because the religious values and morals that we have that we have are that which glue our society. And if that goes, everything else is going to collapse. So that's what I'm saying. But you're right that they're weaponizing Christianity, and they're weaponizing everything again. Even the wars are being weaponized against us. The government wants the people to worship the Son of Mary as God on Sunday, or no buy, no sell. You're saying that's the Son of the Sunday worship. Yes, they're moving towards that. They're moving toward a false system of worship, not because they're worshiping that God too, but it's because that's the only way that they can control the people. And they're going to use some things like AI. I'm seeing some things, ladies and gentlemen. I'm seeing some, AI being used on TikTok, on YouTube in a deceptive way that very soon the Bible says that they're going to cause fire from heaven. They're going to do some strange, miraculous things that are going to bedazzle people's eyes. And people are going to bow down and worship because they're afraid. People respond to the state through fear. But God did not ask us to respond through fear to when we're worshiping him. So it's a false religion. Just like science, it's a false science when we can't sit down and discuss the good and bad part of the vaccines. If we can't have a discourse, then that can't be good science. It's not science, it's religion, right? And the pandemic was a religious event. It was not a scientific at all. It was religious. It was a cult. So I was kind of talking about us culture. What's good for them is not really good for us. Right. It's not good for us, but unfortunately, we came out of that system too. Right. And that's the whole sad thing, that we came out of that system, whether you are Protestant and you're in Barbados, or you're Catholic and you're in the DR or in Cuba, is out of that system that we have inherited. And I was saying here, our constitution, as he was saying, was made only for moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. Right? Now, what does he mean by that? He means that it is the values. He's not talking the principles that he's talking about that should help to guide the nation. Okay, that is what he's talking about. And we have here, who is the Son of Mary? Mary is his mother, correct? Now, the Son of Mary is Christ, right? Well, and it depends on what Mary you're talking about. Are you talking about the Catholic Mary, which is Isis? Or you're talking about the Mary of the Bible? That are two different Marys right now. But we know that in the pagan culture, you have Isis and you have Osiris, right? And, so when you get to the Catholic Church, which really is a pagan church, it brought in back the same saints from the pagan religion right into the church. So it calls Mary, which is Isis, right? And then, God the Father, Osiris, right? So, but as the Bible suggests, the real Mary from the Bible is the Son of God, of Christ. John the Baptist preacher knows who the Son of Mary is, my brother. John the Baptist preacher knows who the Son of Mary is, my brother. I'm not sure what you're saying here. What do you think of wholeness taking deported from other countries? Yeah, I did say that we did do a video last night on that, Jesus. We had a 3-hour live on that. And I think that this is just another attempt to control. And, somebody on the live last night, Chris, I think it was, from Canada, suggested that the government of Jamaica could be moving in the direction of smart cities, which could be something, makes sense, because they're already talking about smart cities in Jamaica. So are these people going to populate these small cities, these smart, not small, but smart cities? Are they going to be populating these smart cities? I don't know, but I think it's a bad move, if you should ask me, right? And it is in line with what we have been discussing on this program. So how do you establish the spiritual foundation of a people, which is one of the pillars of a nation? Well, the nation should not establish spirituality. The nation should allow that space to happen. For I give an example. We are learning from 2008 and onwards that the CIA reads the pastors, what do you call it, sermons. So there are things in the Bible that churches are not allowed to preach against. For example, homosexuality, bestiality, and all these things. The churches are not allowed to speak against these things. Male leadership, you can't talk about that anymore because it suggests that you're discriminating against women, and all of these things. So definitely the church is the state rather is controlling even what the ministers of religion preach and teach. This is the sort of, I'm saying, so not only is, people think about it in a very limited manner. They think it's only the religion that is being controlled by the state, that is controlling the state. But the state is also controlling religion. So it's vice versa. And that is something that we have to understand. Now, remember let's go back to the history of Constantine. Before Constantine came into power in about 331 AD, right? Prior to Constantine, what you had were, I think, 4 emperors before Constantine. But what they were doing, they wanted the Christians, because at that time, before 331, about 10% of the Roman Empire were Christians. So what Constantine wanted to do was because all of the 4 emperors, as I said, were killing the Christians in that empire, because, the Christians would not listen to the pagan people. Remember now that the Roman Empire, even under paganism, was religious. And they didn't want the Christians to follow the biblical religion that they were practicing. They didn't like that. It was a threat to the Roman Empire and the might, the rulership, the dominion of that empire. So what the Romans did now, when they called Constantine to be converted to Christianity, it was not because he was converting, it was not because Constantine liked Christianity, as I'm saying about Trump. It's not because he wanted to worship the true God. What he wanted to do was, he says, if I can't win them, I have to join them. And that's what he did. So he joined them, and when he joined them, he brought in the world into the church, the pagan religion into the church. And even today, we have a lot of pagan influences in the church. Right? So when we talk about Mary, as we're saying in Catholicism, it's not the mother of God, as they're saying, it's Isis. Because that is how they were able now to bring in the pagan deity, but they changed it to Christian names so that people would not be, say, oh no, that is wrong. People just followed it because they say, oh, it's Mary, the mother of God, so I'm going to follow. It's in the Bible. But that is not true. That is not the wrong, it's the wrong representation of Mary, because it's a pagan god. And that is why we also have to be knowledgeable of this sort of history. Yeah, so we are not, the state is not called to spiritualize its citizens. That's the purpose of the church. What the church should do is to ensure that laws protect the institution of the church. Right? So it means, therefore, that because somebody says something from the Bible and it offends you, it should not be that you can just bring the person to court and be executed at the stake, right? And that's we're moving into that. Right now, some churches cannot preach against some sort of sins, because if they do, you can be persecuted by the state, right? So it's a very touchy sort of subject, if you will. Jesus is saying, do you think it's a good idea for Jamaica to take people from other countries? Absolutely not. I said no, they should not. It can't be a good idea. And we don't know. I heard Dr. Horace Chang today suggesting that the people are going to be free. Now, how are they going to be free if they're deported? And why are they being deported if they're going to be free in Jamaica? They're going to let them loose? Who are these people? We don't know who these people are, and we don't know what their history was or entailed. So it can't be a good thing that they're going there. They could be rapists. They could be, criminals who will kill the people down there. So I am not sure. I do not think it's a very good idea. And to me, it does not make sense, as I said last night, for a government that the people belong to reject them. If they are their people, they have to accept them. And the United States normally sends back deportees whether or not the country of origin wants to accept them or not. It has always been the case, and they had to have accepted them. So this is something, a strange sort of development that we don't understand. Yeah, he can't help himself, a Christian, and go across the world to murder people to build resorts. Absolutely. That's what they do. And when you think about the Roman Empire, and remember now, George W. Bush said, we are the new Rome. Rome, the Roman Empire, even under the Christian religion, killed hundreds of millions of people in the name of Christ. The Catholic Church killed millions of people in the name of Christ. But was that false? Yes. That is why religion and politics, as you're saying, Stephen, are toxic. However, we ought not to just think that because it is toxic, the fusion, it means therefore both are not necessary and should not play their role in government. Both have a role to play, but ought not, they should not be merged. And it is something that we have to understand. And that is what the founding fathers understood. But the debate is now so toxic, right? Because we are so polarized between the right and the left that people cannot look beyond and say that this is what we need to do, right? That religion is necessary, but it should not be merged. Science is necessary, but it should not be used as a thus saith the Lord of hosts, as they did during the pandemic. They used science during the pandemic as a thus saith the Lord of hosts. It was even higher than religion. Science in itself was the religion during the pandemic. Even churches were closed down during the pandemic, right? So that's what I'm saying. From both the right and from the left, we can see two different types of religion. One traditionalist and is false. It's not biblically grounded. And another is science. It is secular, but it is a form of religion because it's a cult. So both are cultic or cult-like in operation, and that is what I'm suggesting. But the normal traditional schools and universities are going to give you the illusion that it's only the ones who are proclaiming, the Bible are the cults, right? And the ones who are talking about science are logical, and they are intellectuals, and they are the scholars, and that's what I'm saying, that it is not true. So that is what we have to understand. Without a spiritual foundation, how will one establish a moral fabric or pillar that is supposed to run through a nation? Great. Good question. And that is why I'm happy that you're asking these hard questions, because that is why we have different institutions. So you have the home. So the home should be the place now where the mother and the father, the mother primarily, teach the child spirituality. Right? Whatever it is, whether you are Muslim or you're Hindu or whatever you are, right? I think human beings need to understand that there is a higher power, higher than we are. And I don't think that we need evidence. It is just a fact. Look at rain, look at natural disasters. There are just so many things beyond our control, right? That we just can't just be in this world like that. Right? There has to be something much higher. So I don't care what they want. That is their right to teach their children at home what they want. The school can also be an institution that continues to nurture that, right? And then the primary role of the state is to ensure that these sort of principles are protected. For example, it is my opinion now, not that this is a fact, all right? And unlike what Fonzie is saying, I have an agenda. This is my opinion. I don't have a problem, just like here in the Caribbean, that people study the Bible in schools. I don't have a problem with that. They should be able to study the Bible, the Quran, the Hindu texts, the whatever religion. They do that here in the Caribbean, where people learn religious education. Right? And it doesn't mean, therefore, when you go to school in the Caribbean, that the teachers there are telling you that you must be Muslim or you must be Hindu or you must be Christian. What they're doing, they're having a text and they're teaching you about different world religions, right? Nothing is wrong with that. The state now ought to guide freedom of expression. So I might be in a class, which when I was in school, right? And I would challenge my teacher in the classroom about my own, religious beliefs, and nothing is wrong with that. And you have an interchange in terms of why the Christian religion might be right or why the Hindu is the right one. We should have those debates. It's healthy for society. And it helps our society to understand each other. What we're living in, particularly in the United States, is a polarized society where one is telling you that religion should be out of schools, yet they're having, you can't read the Bible, and the Bible portrays a different source of origin of life, how we came about. Shouldn't that be important too? Yes, it should be important, but should you indoctrinate the student with it? No, just tell them that, just like the theory of evolution, teach them that too. That in secular schools, you have other forms, whether what the Muslims say, what this person might say, what the Hindus say. Teach it to them and allow them to think for themselves and say, what is it that they would like to choose? Do they believe the biblical historical recount or account, or do they believe the Hindu account? Do they believe the Christian, whatever? And then that is their civic right, and no society should tell them that they should not believe in any other way. And that's what I'm saying. I'm not suggesting here. So this is where now it should be. The school can be a learning tool to educate us into how these religions function. Okay? San Leandro, a lot of people are going to fall off this foolishness, and you're going to have people in the Caribbean repeating the same nonsense. Yeah, because it's true. All of us, anything the US does, we do, unfortunately. Anything they do, we follow in lockstep. Christianity is a false religion, cult, and the Son of Mary is an idol. Discuss with anyone who's not emotional and shows decorum on that, no problem, my brother. But what's your evidence that it is a false religion? You tell me, show me. Where is it? Where's your evidence? You have none. Okay, so that is what you need to do, right? So you have to study, you have to read. It doesn't seem like you have done that. The Pope is the official leader of all followers of the Son of Mary. Hear this again, lack of knowledge. The Roman Catholic Church is the mother church, the body of Christ. That is not true. It's not the mother church, right? It's the mother church for all people who worship on Sunday, and that's for sure. Right, but it's not the mother church in terms of the Christian church, the true Christian church. In fact, one of the reasons why you had Michael Smith, and I'm going to educate you now, since you want to be educated, that you have to learn the difference between Catholicism and Protestantism. And that is what we started out with. So you've got to first learn that, and then we can have a serious intellectual conversation about Catholicism, not being the mother church, because that is why Martin Luther, right, separated from them during the Lutheran church and many other churches that came out of that revolution. But you are right in the sense that the Catholic Church was the one that instituted the reverence of the Sunday as the day of God. So from that perspective, they are the mother church for everybody who worship on Sunday, because that's not biblical, right? But in terms of being the mother church of the Bible and what God wants us to do, they are not. They are a harlot. The Bible talks about a harlot church. Go and read Revelation 18 and you will get some enlightenment. The Caribbean countries are being treated as though they are a penal colony, the way Australia was made penal colony by Britain. And it's true. It's true. It's true. And that's why we're having these deportees going back to being sent there, and nobody's really able to do anything. Thus saith the Creator is not the Son of Mary. Thus saith the Creator is not the Son of Mary. I don't understand what you're saying, Michael. It seems like you have to express it in a better, clearer manner. I'm not following that thought. Could you rewrite it? Then we have the Michael said, the spiritual foundation for salvation through Christ, accept Christ to rise from the dead on the third day for salvation. Without this, there is no salvation. Christ's resurrection was not the day that people should worship on. His salvation brought us redemption, absolutely. But remember now that the Sabbath was an institution at the time of creation. But the redemption, absolutely. The third day, he resurrected, but he never told us to commemorate that. Are you Catholic, Michael? Would like to know. Yes. Then we have the Stephen Knight is saying that's why you as a parent should teach your child. Right. That is where it comes first. Teach your child from a wrong and education should be in the school building. Yeah, the first education should be in the home, and the spiritual education should be from there, or the lack of spiritual education, right? So if you want your child to be atheist, that's okay. And that's another thing too. If you go to schools in the Caribbean too, there are Jehovah's Witnesses in the schools in the Caribbean, and when they have their morning devotions, Jehovah's Witnesses don't have to participate, because they have their civic right. It is their right not to participate in the morning devotion. So the Caribbean is really a place, an example that the United States could use in this understanding of the separation of church and state. To some extent, not in all cases, but to some extent, right? Because in our school system, we have different religions, people belong to different religions, and then we respect, right, what different religions come and they can express themselves, and they can try to convince us that their religion is the right one. Nothing is wrong with that. That's the sort of debates we want to have in schools, right? Nothing is wrong with that. It's healthy, and it's also intellectually charged. The Pope wears a Dagon hat, right? And the Pope is actually the Antichrist, right? He is not the biblical, but he doesn't represent the biblical Christ. The fact that he say that he's vicar of Christ on earth, he's God on earth, I mean, that is blasphemy, right? To say that you are a man who does a lot of evil stuff, he does a lot of evil stuff, right, is going to give us the impression that he is God on earth. Something that is incredible, and it happened during the 1260 years of the Dark Ages in Europe. The founding fathers remembered that, and that is why they encouraged the separation of church and state, because when church dominates the state, they know that persecution, or vice versa. Defend the gospel, where Christ to rise from the dead, were Christ to rise from the dead, on the third day, written in the law and prophets stands. I'm still not understanding. Defend the gospel where is Christ to rise from the dead on the third day, written in the law and prophets stands. I'm not understanding. Sorry. Maybe I'm tired. So we have let me get here now. We have they transpose Tammuz as Jesus, right? Right. So that is what the Catholic Church is very good in terms of. They said you don't, okay, we can't win you, so we have to join you. That's what the Catholic Church did. And they did a very good job of deceiving Christians and what the Bible teaches. Michael Smith is saying Paul and the son of Mary both falsely claim the Christ. Paul and the son of Mary. Why are you using the son of Mary? Are you referring to Jesus? Why don't just use his name? Paul, you're writing, just like Fonzie, you're writing mysteriously here, Michael Smith. Are you using a different handle? Paul and the son of Mary both falsely claim that Christ to rise from the dead on the third day is written in the law and the prophets, but it is not written at all whatsoever. Paul and the son of Mary both falsely claim that Christ to rise from the dead on the third day is written in the law and the prophets, but it is not written. Right, it's not written at all. I agree with you. Right? It's not written at all. So, because while Christ's resurrection is important, because it is through him that we are redeemed from our sins, it doesn't mean, therefore, that he has asked us to commemorate the Sunday as a day of worship. Then we have Isaiah and or Zechariah speak of rising on the third day, I believe. Okay. Now, what is the significance of the third day? Could you say that for me? What is not Magila, but can you tell me, Michael Smith, what is the significance of the third day? Can you connect that dot and tell me if that is why we should worship on Sunday, whatever. But let's get back to our Christian. We were talking about the Christian nationalism that we see in the States that is going to wind up bringing in the mark of the beast, because that's where they're moving on into, right? It's not that this is going to just be something that is going to just, die, right? It's not going to disappear. It's going to grow in intensity, and eventually they're going to call for us to worship something, right? Whether it's a pope or it's AI, right? Or it is science or whatever, they are going to ask us to eventually worship something. Now, will you want to do that? And this is where it stands now. Doesn't it mean, therefore, that we have to get an understanding, a clear understanding of what the role religion plays? Because in the final analysis, if we are going to be asked to worship something or someone, shouldn't we know who we're worshiping? Right? These are the questions we have to ask ourselves. Should we underestimate religion, the role of religion in society, or should we try to understand the religions in the world and what we think we might ascribe to? Because in the final analysis, in the final showdown, we are going to have to make a decision, whether we like it or not, right? Whether you're man, woman, Chinese, American, you are going, and it's not going to be done by the group. It is not going to be done by the group. It's going to be done individually, where you will have to stand up. And right now we're having a debate. People are going to debate you. There are scholars who are going to challenge you on your belief system. And they're going to have a system of, what do you call it now, counteract. They're going to have answers to counteract whatever. So you have to make sure that you know in whom you believe, whether it's a Muslim religion, it's a Christian religion, or it's the Hindu. You must know. I can't determine that for you. When Fongzi was saying I don't have any agenda, I'm just trying to present to you that eventually you and I, not only you, but you and I will have to give an account, will be required to worship. That's the mark of the beast. As any man. And remember, during the pandemic, everybody was talking about that, including atheists. I've heard many people who said, I never used to believe in God. I don't believe in religion at all. But what happened during the pandemic? Makes me think that something is amiss. It has to do much more than with science. It has to be between the good and evil, that sort of play. And it is true. It is true. But we have still not woken up. We're still looking at Trump and Biden and Trump and Kamala and white Christian nationalism and black Christian nationalism, when at the end of the day, the vaccine was not black or white or Hispanic. It was a vaccine that they were giving to all of us and saying, either you take it or you're going to lose your job. The same thing they're going to do in the last days, in the final, and we're building up to those days. This is the religion that I want you to worship. Will you bow down? If you don't, you will be killed. Right? Now, Michael Smith said, if it is not written, if you falsely claim it is, then you are a false teacher and a false prophet, both Paul and the son of Mary. Right? You're speaking in a mysterious way, and I can't understand what you're saying. Be now clear in what you're saying so that I can give you a proper response. But I don't know. I'll tell you I don't know. The word amen, WHZ saying the word amen at the end of prayer is really the Egyptian god Amun that became part of Christianity. Would have to research that. I'm not sure about that, because amen just means and so let it be, right? And so let it be, which means therefore that you're saying that is, I leave that up to the Almighty. Also the Ammonites. Okay, and then we have Michael is saying here, Michael Smith, Christ rise from the dead on the third day, foundation for all followers, salvation through Christ, a great deception and strong delusion not written in the law and the prophets. Case closed. But again, cryptic, don't know what you're saying, don't see the connection in what we're discussing. But yeah, but thank you for that sort of comment. Now, we look at let us look at the whole Christian nationalism and some insights that and before we go, because we need to go now. Thankfully, Christian history does not so readily support this argument in the terms of in this essay, I want to focus on two cited examples of centralized theocratic power: the reign of Constantine, the first Roman emperor to be a Christian, and the political theology of Thomas Aquinas. Have you heard about Thomas Aquinas? Few figures loom larger in the Christian imagination than Constantine. His seemingly miraculous conversion to Christianity and control of the entire Roman Empire have led many to see him as the beginning of the marriage religious institutions with state power. Many traditions venerate Constantine as a saint, and while you can find religious authors today that criticize his brand of governance, the Christians of his time were ecstatic. The bishop and scholar Eusebius of Caesarea wrote a powerful endorsement of Constantine's reign, comparing the rule of one emperor to the rule of the one God over the universe. Christian nationalists point to Constantine as an example of how God can work through a ruler to bring about good ends. How many of us would never have found Christianity had Constantine not legalized it? That's what they're saying. Would our faith in the Trinity be the same if Constantine had not called the Council of Nicaea? Now, this is something we have to hold on to. The same thing is happening in America right now, right? What they're seeing is that America is becoming, day by day, an atheistic nation where people are less interested in religion. So what they're calling for, people who are more religious are calling for a religious leader, that of Trump and any other who will come after him, because they think that that person is going to bring back the society to the days in which people were more religious and more morally upstanding. But was Constantine a good person? No, he wasn't. Right? He was just using the arm of the state and religion to control the people, to unite the people, because Americans are right now more polarized than ever too. So what they want, these leaders, even though they want to some extent division and distraction, but they also want to unite us around a certain value system, around a certain common purpose, which is, of course, the one world government. They will have to send to us, right, these theocratic leaders who are going to tell us that the society is collapsing, which it is collapsing, and there's no doubt about that in terms of its moral fabric, and that they are there to reinstitute and to refashion and to remold society in the image in which it should be. That's what they're going to come and tell us. And that is where we are standing at the moment. So you're going to have Trump, and you're going to have another person worse than Trump who will eventually come and say, I am that savior. I am that Messiah who have come now to reinstitute morality into a state. Because right now, people, let's be fair, whether you and I like it or not, and we're not here to promote religion, but we know at the moment that our politicians are corrupt. We know that the system is entirely rotten to the core, and people are not in the educational system, in science, they don't know what to do. What's the solution? And people are going to call for the solution is within a being that is more powerful than us. And that's why they're going to eventually include religion. Most people will accept it because it will sound plausible. It will sound logical, because they are impacted by the lack of morality demonstrated by their governments. They're seeing, look at what we're seeing in the United States with Epstein and with people being raped, children being sacrificed. We see corruption that is, it's almost like it's like now become indelibly entrenched in the political system. So people are crying out and they're calling for something, and they can't get any solutions. And that is the reason why they are going to turn to a politician. They've already begun. in terms of in Trump and some other peoples around the world, some of the politicians around the world, in Argentina and some of these religious right-wing countries, they are now turning to politicians who are presenting to them that they are the Messiah sent by God with divine rights, right, to actually rule and govern them and bring back their society to some decency and state of moral order. Right, and that is what they're suggesting in this sort of analysis. The Creator Yah, power of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, and never told you to accept Christ, to rise from the dead on the third day. For we're not going to get into that sort of, what we're looking at is the rise of Christian nationality. If we have a conversation who is Christ and all of that, we can have a discussion on that. But let's stick to the conversation of what we're dealing with here, which is the rise of Christian nationalism in the United States. Let us not get off track right now, okay? Is Michael okay? Yeah, but I think that he's giving a lot of, what do you call it now, historic whatever, and nothing is wrong with that, but let us stay on track in terms of the rise of Christian nationality, and nationalism rather, so we can make connections and and see what is happening, and because there are lots of things to unpack, and maybe I don't remember something and you can remind me of what I'm missing. That's why we're here. Nebuchadnezzar is a better example in terms of the merger of church and state and all of that. Yes, Nebuchadnezzar was a good example of that too. But if Nebuchadnezzar, as you're saying, Magala, Nebuchadnezzar was a good example to show us that religion does play a huge role in any state. Because in Daniel 2, the account that was given to us, we learned that the king had a dream, right? And the king could not remember his dream. And what happened? Then he went to the astrologists, right? And all the sorcerers and all these people, these men who believed in witchcraft, which means that they believed, and the scientists, they believed in gods who are not living among men. Excuse me. And when Nebuchadnezzar asked them to tell him the dream that he had, they were like, how can you ask us as men to tell you a dream that you dreamt? You first tell us the dream and then we'll give you the interpretation. But no man, they're saying, these people told them, the sorcerers and the astrologists and astrologers, whatever, they said no man can that live among flesh can tell the king, can declare to the king, right, his dreams. So only the people who lives among the gods. So from that time into the Medes and the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, they all had their religions, and religions were merged with the state. Talk about the Roman deities, right? So this society, the United States, is moving back to that sort of times. We're regressing. We're not moving forward. So when we think that in our school systems, we can just get rid of religion is not going anywhere. What we should do is to decide what role it should play. And we're saying that it should not be merged and fused with the state. We should not have a national religion. The politics or politicians should not weaponize religion against people, right? People should be free to not believe in Mary, to not believe in the Bible, to not believe in church. They should be free to live their lives the way how they want to lead their lives. That is what we call freedom of conscience, right? Freedom of conscience. Of course, you'll have to accept the consequences that follow, but the fact of the matter is that you should have that freedom. And that is the foundation that we're laying here. However, we cannot, deny the role of religion in society. And I think both are wrong when they say that it should be separate and shouldn't have anything like it shouldn't have any purpose in society. Because it's not true. Just like I'm saying, no matter how corrupt science is, no matter how corrupt government is still necessary in any society. Government plays a role in any society. Science, even though it's corrupt, plays its role and has a very important role in the development of any human civilization. So the question is, what role should religion play? the values, the principles, or governments should be run on the sound principles of the Christian, the Christian belief system, but it should not, the beliefs, the dogmas should not be imposed upon people of the world, citizens of that particular country. And that is what the essence of our discussion is about, right? The rise of Christian nationalism. Now, we are moving into the one-world government, the one-world order. Many people think that the one-world order has to do with just Freemasonry and Illuminati and all of these secret societies, right? But it has to do with religion. At the end of the day, it is going to be, who is your king? Is Christ your king? Is the Hindu, whatever, Krishna? Is that your king? Is Trump your king? Is your money your king? Is your house your king? These are the questions that you have to understand. But whether they are your king or not, they're going to want you to work. The state is going to demand that you worship their king and not yours. So that's where it is. And if you have any questions, any comments, I think that this is the essence. But we're moving into that direction, and this is what I had to say. Any comments, questions? We're almost 3 hours into our discussion, which was another interesting, enlightening conversation. Very difficult because it is, many people are polarized by the rise of the Christian nationalism, but it's a discourse that we need to have. Make sure you like I see some comments. I'm sorry, I didn't see your comments here. I'm sorry. The Council of Nicaea, throughout the Ethiopian Orthodox canons, a lot of people are now looking toward Ethiopian Orthodox values and morality. That is interesting. The mark of the beast, the son of Mary, who will be elevated by the government to be worshipped on Sunday to save America, or by our no self. Yeah, well, there's going to be some beast, and you're correct about that they're going to present to us and say that that's going to be the God to save America, right? In the beginning, in Hebrew pictograms shows a Messiah will come to defeat evil. Well, that's what the Bible teaches, that the Messiah is going to come to destroy the entire world and to defeat and to destroy evil, as you're saying. Christian nationalists' plan is to promote the son of Mary, idol worship on the people, forcing them by no cell restrictions. And Jesus is saying, you need to talk to Dr. Chang about the deportees coming to Jamaica. This is very important. Remember, I did have the live last night, Jesus. Did you try to have that? Go and look at that live. Remember, I can't talk about everything in all lives, but I did deal with that very well. So share with him the video that I sent you. I don't have any contacts with Dr. Chang, so you might want to send the video the live I had last night. Go on the channel and you'll see the live that I had last night, and you send it to Dr. Chang. Religious freedom is the code for tolerating witches and Satanists in America. All of that is also a part of religion. Yeah, all of that is a part of religion. It seems every idol worship of the sun is accompanied by Mary or Semiramis. Yes, that's true, and that is the whole pagan sort of philosophy, or Isis worship alongside it, and that is the real problem. And that is coming, and the church, the Catholic Church, has all of those things inside. Luke 11, verse 27, 28. Okay, I don't have that on me right now. Jesus is saying that U.S. military ship, right? After they send the ship, can you imagine that they're now telling us that we have to accept, deportees who are non-Jamaicans? That's crazy. Christ is king in the mind of deceived followers of the Son of Mary. Discuss this with anyone who is not emotional. Shows the core. All right, I can see that Fungsies, you're the one now. I can see your trend of thought. That U.S. military ship that came was a warning to the Jamaican government to follow the rules. I don't think they had to send that ship, though. I think that from a long time, Jamaicans were told to follow the rules, right? Right. Religion, WHZ saying, is a vital foundation of one of the pillars of a nation. Yes, there must be a balance between church and state, so one can't violate the state and its citizens. Absolutely. They should not be merged, but the state should protect the rights of all. So I said to them, WHZ, that if I'm Jehovah's Witness and I live in the Caribbean and they're having normal regular devotions, my rights should be protected not to want to participate in that devotion, because Jehovah's Witness don't believe in having public participation in worship with people who are not a part of their denomination. So I should have and be able to exercise that right, which the state should help me to protect. Yes, from that perspective. The son of Mary is not king according to Torah Tanakh. All predictions, Alexis, welcome. All predictions must come to pass in order for this system of things to be destroyed. Absolutely. And that's what we're seeing right now happening right before our eyes, that the prophecies are coming to pass, right? And we need to share these lives, because, these lives are going to help people to become aware that something is happening and that they need to get out of this mode in terms of defining Christian nationalism as in terms of just blacks versus white, because it's much bigger than that. And it came to be as he was saying this, a certain woman from the crowd raised her voice and said to him, "Blessed is the womb that bore you and the breasts which you sucked." And we have here, but he said, "Blessed rather are those hearing the word of Elohim and watching over it." What a great discussion we had tonight. Any more discussion? Where do you think Trump is going with his Christian nationalism? Do you think that we're going to end up being a theocracy in the final analysis? Do you think America and other states in the Caribbean, do you think they're going to end up in the final analysis becoming a theocracy? Please let me know. Any other comment? I think you're tired like myself, so maybe we want to go now and get some rest. We will have maybe a break tomorrow, and then on Friday night we're coming back with the Iran war, this sort of truce, the peace that that they're telling us about, and we're going to look at Daniel 2, have an in-depth understanding of what these beasts are, and understand that we are in the toes right now of the Roman Empire and the divided Roman Empire. And we're going to go from history and look and see what some of these people have said, right? Including some of the founding fathers of the United States, and where we are now in the stream of things, right? Let's now open up our minds. I'm not here. I don't have an agenda. I'm not, I wish perhaps I could be, connected to powerful people. I'm just kidding. But the fact of the matter, I don't have any agenda but to help us to understand, just like how you're here to help us to understand, things that I might not have been exposed to. I am also here to help you to understand that there are reasoning that we have to now move beyond our feelings, move beyond what we think we know, and this sort of black, white, and right, left narrative that they have forced us into these camps, and people think that, if they're in the left, that means that they're brighter, and those who are on the right think that they're smarter. That's not how the society is really run, and that's not how you acquire knowledge. Knowledge is acquired through looking at things from all sides and angles and see what makes sense. And that is what we are trying to do on this channel, Declassified Caribbean. Michael Smith is saying, it's not bigger than black versus white, my brother. You cannot fully understand scripture prophecy for the latter days without understanding this. Thank you so much for joining. Any other comment? Any suggestions? Yes. Okay, Michael Smith. Any other suggestion? Any questions? Any final comment? Okay, then. So thank you so much for joining, and have yourselves a great night. And try to come for the the discussion on Friday night on the Iranian war and where we are heading, where we are now, rather, in the stream of time. Share the video, like it, make sure you don't leave until you like the videos. And those who can make your monetary donation, even a dollar, guys, goes a long way to help us to, to take care of some of the expenses we have in doing these live programs. Thank you so much, and see you in another live on Friday. Ciao.